God forbid, this thing that we all want, which is to find love, that for most people in this life is like the #1 thing they want to find. God forbid I look like I'm looking for it. And by the way, that pattern makes a lot of us feel like we are broken. Like there is something fundamentally wrong with me. Are my standards too high? Am I too picky? Is that what's preventing me from finding love? For me, it's all about asking.
According to a poll you conducted, people's biggest fear is dying alone. And because of that, they are left feeling lost, desperate, chasing, or settling for less than we deserve. So what toxic advice is actually trapping us and adding fuel to the fire?
There are things that will attract someone, and then there are things that will find you a partner who's right for you. And they're not always the same thing. And advice out there that works in some ways is very dangerous because of what or who it might attract, but it is very kind of self-validating because it works. You know, you might have advice that says, don't text someone back for X number of days, you know, don't call too quickly, do this, do that. And in some ways it might work, but you have to ask yourself, who is it working on? And am I just feeding this cycle that keeps me unhappy? Is this preventing me from really being seen by somebody? If someone, let's say, went cold on you and you got the advice to be someone who was very cool and indifferent because you were like, you don't want to show that you're affected by someone going cold on you because that's not confident and that shows you've been thinking about them too much. So
don't look desperate.
Don't look desperate. Be cool and indifferent when they come back to me so that I show that they haven't affected me.
Right.
But the problem with that advice is that they have affected you. It has affected you. You, let's say, went on a few good dates with that person. You had a really great time. It felt like it may have been going somewhere. You felt this sense of progress. Their words and their actions appeared to back that up. And then they just, out of nowhere, went completely cold. It affected you. To deny that and to pretend something else does harm in a number of ways. First, you're being an inauthentic version of yourself. So they're not really seeing you. They're getting some representative, but they're not seeing you. So they can't even know whether they're attracted to you truly, because what they're getting is some strange, cool, indifferent facade that bears no resemblance to the reality of what you're really feeling. Second, they can't see what your intentions are, because by being cool and indifferent, they have no idea what you want. I write about this in the book. You know, someone I know went away for a trip in the middle of having some great dates, like early dates with someone. He went away on a trip and he was a little quiet on that trip. And after his, I don't know what it was, 3-4 day trip, this person said to him, I got a little, I felt a little strange while you were away because I didn't hear from you very much and it made me feel like you could have been sharing your bed with someone else. Now, a lot of people may feel like, oh, I wouldn't want to say that. That's a very desperate thing to say, or that shows I care too much, or that might scare someone away. But what it did for him was it told him exactly who she was. It told him what her intentions were, that this wasn't a person who was interested in having some kind of casual fling. And by being vulnerable enough to say, I felt strange because it made me, not hearing from you while you were on your trip made me feel like you could have been sharing your bed with someone else. That said to him, I'm someone to be taken seriously for something more. I'm not someone who's going to be one more person added to your rotation. The interesting thing about that is that for him in this situation, it was almost a little attractive. It was almost a little sexy. It was almost a little like, you know when you realize, do you know what it's like? It's like the first time you are dating someone and they get a little, not like in some kind of bad or toxic way, they just feel a little jealous about something. There's something about the first time someone feels a little jealous about something that you have done or said, or the way that someone was around you, that can actually be quite lovely. It's like you've crossed over into someone caring.
Yeah.
And you feel it, not in the form of some kind of toxic jealousy, but you just, in the little like, oof, that made me feel a bit jealous. And maybe the vulnerability that they shared that with you, it's almost a compliment to you. You go, oh, we've crossed over here. We've crossed over from indifference into caring. And that, the intentionality that takes us towards, it can be a very, very positive thing. So back to the example, when someone doesn't text you for a few days and then you play it cool and indifferent, you're not being seen for who you really are. There's no vulnerability to it, and vulnerability can be very attractive. There's no intentionality being communicated, so they don't know what you want. And on top of all of that, it enables their worst side. Because now, when you're cool and indifferent, what their brain registers is 0 consequences. There's no downside to, me going cold and then reaching out again out of nowhere. What we think is us taking control, because I'm not giving you control, I'm not giving you power, is actually doing the very opposite, because what I'm doing is rewarding this behavior by mirroring your lack of investment, but also showing you that when you do show up, I'm right there with you. And that's why because I've said this on your show before, we have to be very careful sometimes with the way we apply advice, because I say that line, don't invest in, I still think it's one of the best things I've ever said. Don't invest in someone based on how much you like them. Invest in someone based on how much they invest in you. Now, that's a very powerful idea. Don't invest in someone based on how much you like them. Invest in someone based on how much they invest in you. But here we have an example of a situation where that advice has to be nuanced, because if you took that advice in this situation, you'd go, well, they're not investing for those 5 days, so I'm not going to invest. Oh, they just sent me a text, I'm going to send a text back.
Yes, and then that becomes part of the toxic advice that you get, because you're like, well, if he doesn't do it, then I'm not going to do it.
Correct. And so now we have, you kind of have like a layer of nuance that you have to layer on top of that, which is, that's good macro advice, but in the beginning of any relationship or dating, there always has to be a moment where one person invests marginally more than the other. Otherwise, we'd never get anywhere.
Yeah.
We'd be at school, 2 people on opposite sides of the dance floor at the disco, just staring at each other, and everyone going, well, I'm going to wait for them to invest before I invest, and then no one does anything. Yeah. We all have to, at some point, one person has to, even if it's 1% more, one person has to do 1% more. But the mistake people make is, if I do 1% more and you don't meet me there, I give 1% more and 1% more and 1% more. So that gets us into a really bad dynamic. What I would suggest for that situation where someone doesn't text you for 5 days and then reaches out to you is, actually in that moment, authenticity is your superpower. If you can suggest to someone that I was really enjoying spending time with you, but it's nice to hear from you, but I got a little sad that I didn't hear from you this week. That moment of vulnerability, I got a little sad, isn't I'm gonna be sad for the next 6 months. It's not I'm gonna keep being sad if you keep not showing up. It's just, I was really excited to hear from you and then I didn't hear from you. I'm just showing who I am. And it might be that me showing you who I am is actually what makes me different, because we live in a world today where there's such a lack of vulnerability in so many people's dating lives, because we think the worst sin in the world is to feel desperate or to be desperate or to seem like we care too much, or even with our friends and family to look like we really want to find love. God forbid. This thing that we all want, which is to find love, that for most people in this life is like the #1 thing they want to find. God forbid I look like I'm looking for it. You know, that's shameful because we are shamed all the time for looking for it. We're shamed by society. We're shamed by friends and family who think we're trying too hard or we think about it too much. And then we're worried we're going to get shamed by the people we date for looking like we want the very thing that we're on a date to find.
Oh my God, that's so true. So in those moments, I think people, you know, the marshmallow study, where they do that, they did that test with the kids and they put one marshmallow in front of them. They said, if you don't eat this marshmallow, then when I come back into the room, I'm actually going to give you 2. And so it's how many kids could avoid eating the one marshmallow and then actually get double down the road. And they followed those people, I think, for like 30 years. And they saw the most successful people are actually the people that didn't eat the marshmallow. So you can withstand momentary happiness for future gains. Those are the people that are most successful. So as you're talking, I'm thinking through that most people have been starved, if I'm going to continue down this analogy for a second. People have been starved. They've given someone one marshmallow, and even if the marshmallow, they can do better, right? They hold on, they maybe say the thing that's hard to say, risk potentially getting either rejected or, you know, moving on from that relationship. Most people take that marshmallow because they're not sure if the second one is coming down the road. How do you prevent people from then taking that marshmallow? Meaning, trying to play it cool because you think that that's what they want, because you're hoping that down the line they're going to commit. But actually, if you pretend, then down the line, they're going to eventually see who you truly are, because that will always come out in the wash. And then you may not actually end up in the relationship anyway.
Oh my God, that's such a big question.
I know.
And if I take it one step further, how do you stop someone eating not just the marshmallow today, but how do you stop someone eating the poison marshmallow? Like, it's literally laced with poison, but you're like, I don't know where my next meal is going to come from, so I'm going to eat it anyway. And then keep eating poison marshmallows because you're worried that you're never going to get a good marshmallow again. Like, so I'll just have these because I know they're here.
Even if it's making you sick.
Yeah, and that describes so many people's love lives. There's so much to this question. There's, why do we eat the poison marshmallow? Why do we think the poison marshmallow is so exciting? Like, what is it about this marshmallow that feels so desirable to us? Where does that come from? How do we start to want the marshmallow that's better for us?
Down the road.
Which may come down the road, or may even be available today, but we look at it and we're like, it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as interesting. And it doesn't speak to me. It doesn't taste as good as this one over here. Like, that's a reality too. So what's going on there? And you know, there's a chapter in this book I wrote called Never Satisfied. You know, I start the chapter by talking about what so many of us face, which is I get hurt by all the people I'm excited about when I find them. And then I revert to finding people that make me feel safe, but then I'm bored and doubt whether it's the right thing. And so I leave that person and I go back out in search of something that's exciting, but then the exciting thing makes me suffer. And then I go looking for safe, but safe makes me bored and question whether it's the right thing. And we do this figure eight between those two things. And so what's happening there? And by the way, that pattern makes a lot of us feel like we are broken. Like there is something fundamentally wrong with me. That I keep chasing these people, I keep getting hurt. Or maybe we don't even have that level of awareness. Maybe we don't even see them as these people. All we see is just that I keep going after people who I like who don't want me. Or I never meet anyone I like, but the moment I did, they broke my heart. What's wrong with me? Why can it never work out for me?
Before you answer, that's why I started with the question of this episode, because when people feel like that, they just grasp at anything. Hope, right? Hope is so powerful. And so in grasping at the hope, you just take the advice that's coming in, and the advice that's coming in can then lead to toxicity that then leads for you to be playing mind games. And now you feel even lost than before you even started. Yeah,
because you're doing anything you can to try and hold on to this thing that feels so elusive to you. And so much of what you're being told feels like it's a greater and greater departure from who you are and how you really feel, a true expression of your desires, your hopes and your dreams. And that's hard. And by the way, it's also it makes us mad sometimes when we're a different version of ourselves and that works better, or we're like we have to pretend to be something else and then it gets us a result. Even that feels like it builds resentment and cynicism. When I think about this, I always start from a place of, let's just begin with why we constantly invite bad people or people who behave badly into our lives. Like, what is that I keep inviting in the wrong behavior in some way or tolerating it for too long? And that is something I believe we have to give ourselves a tremendous amount of compassion for. Because we learned whatever wiring we have that is inviting that in or finding that in some way interesting or getting attracted to that is not voluntary. We didn't decide it. This is our nervous system got wired at a time in our lives where we were not in control of it, where we were just trying to survive. And we didn't necessarily learn the right instincts or get the right wiring. If we had love that was inconsistent when we were growing up, if we were taught that we had to earn love by being something, or by doing things, or by pleasing everyone, or by showing up in a certain way, by achieving, if we were continuously abandoned, if a parent disappeared for 5 days and then came back on day 6 and gave us a present, and we felt like, oh my God, because for those 5 days you were abandoned. But now on the 6th day, you got hit and it feels like, oh, that's love. And so we go into adulthood and we've wired up that that's what love looks like. And so now you've got someone who makes you feel anxious and scared and doesn't text you back for 5 days, which, by the way, as an adult, even though it feels completely irrational, you feel like you're going to die because this person hasn't texted you back. But it's because it comes from a very real time in your life where that was genuine fear. And you were in survival mode, and you did feel like this love is what's going to keep me alive. These are the people caring for me. These are the people who have to take care of me. In adult life, our body is just doing what our body has learned to do. So now you have someone who is chaotic and it feels familiar. Now you have someone who is hot and cold, and it really resonates with the frequency of what you've learned love is. And it feels like, oh, that's love. Terrible lows and really high highs, that's love. I recognize this. And so we chase after that going, this is the real thing. Oh, that person who feels peaceful and is actually turning to meet me and is simple and said they had a great time after the date. Would you like to do something tomorrow? That feels weird. That feels a little strange. Love can't come that easy. This person must be a little...
And what you said earlier, you may even perceive that as like boring.
You can perceive it as strange, scary, boring, at the very least unfamiliar. So you don't know what to... It's kind of like not even on your radar. You know, there's a thing I write about in the book, which I'm really obsessed with as a concept, which is, and this isn't a new concept. The race car driver, I think Mario Andretti, talks about, you know, when you're driving a race car, don't look at the wall. Your eyes go, the car goes where your eyes go. So if you're looking at the wall, you're going to crash into the wall. I don't know that people stop for long enough to really realize how much that's true in their lives. How long have we been staring at a wall that is whatever we keep expecting in life, whatever we've learned to expect, where we no longer know that anything else even exists? I struggled for a long time, without even realizing it, I struggled to trust people because I always just felt like everyone had an agenda. And there's plenty in my life that led me to feel that way. And, you know, but I always felt like people would take more than they give. And so you had to watch your back all the time, and you had to be careful how much you gave because, you know, there was always an agenda. There was always something else that someone wanted. And it was very present in the way that I was struggling to be vulnerable, that I struggled to truly let people in, that I struggled to give because I felt like if I gave, I would get taken advantage of. And that held me back in many ways in my life. But that was one wall that I had. It was like I kept focusing on the wall. And of course, when you focus on it, you find it. Anytime someone did something that showed that they weren't trustworthy, there it is. That's why I don't do it. And it can take a lot to start to take our gaze and point it in a different direction. But that's the hard part, is what we have learned is what we know. And what we know, we look for. It's familiar, it feels familiar in the way it shows up in our life. And doing something else, I think we always underestimate how much of an aversion we have to things that just don't feel like the things we're used to. People that aren't like the people we're used to, situations that aren't like the situations we're used to, feelings that aren't like the feelings we're used to. I really truly believe so much of psychology can just be explained by what's unfamiliar to us. It's not in our reality. And if we're not careful, we're staring at the wall for so long that the wall becomes the world. We think they're the same thing. And we don't realize that that not everyone is having that same experience we are, that this is a world that we have created by staring at that one wall for so long that we just think that's how life is. And what I believe we have to train ourselves to do is, one of the core kind of themes of the book is to be curious about experiences other than the ones we are having. Who's having a different experience of life than I am? There's a moment in the book where I talk about being in this bar in Japan and everyone having a good time, and my hypervigilance that I've had my whole life, where I'm like constantly like looking for the danger in the room. You know, I grew up from 13 years old working in a nightclub. So it was like I was around so much, like it wasn't a nice nightclub either. It was like a nightclub where a lot went wrong. But I got this sense of like violence being ever present, and everyone it was a bit of a rough scene, and it was like, it wasn't the only thing that contributed to that hypervigilance, but it was certainly part of it. And that means that now in my life, if I'm not careful, I'm looking for the trouble. And, I found myself a few years ago being in this bar and someone looking at my brother over and over and over again. And me, because I'm always scanning the room, so I'm looking and seeing everything. My brother's just having a blissfully good time. And I'm like, how are they just so relaxed over there having a good time? Like, I can see this person's gonna kick off and this. And I remember going over to the person, like nothing had happened. But I went over to the person and decided to like have a word. And by the way,
a strong word.
The way I had the word only amplified.
Right, it didn't help the situation.
No, it was like it wasn't me going over and being like, hey buddy, how's your night going? It was like, everything all right?
Mate.
Yeah, can we have a conversation? Is there anything you want to sort out? Like, it was like going into this sort of like mode. And my, my blood is up and my body, everything. My brother came over, he's like, what are you doing? I said, and in my mind, I'm like, you don't understand. This is about to kick off. You're not like, and I remember thinking to myself, how does this not happen when I'm not around? Scanning the room
how
for
do they
threats.
survive?
How do they get home? and I had to realize, like, oh, they don't get into situations. This isn't, and I don't want to give the impression, by the way, I'm not someone my MO is not I go out and fight. I'm the opposite of that. The last thing I want is a fight. And my brain is at the same time giving this constant public service announcement. We're not safe. We have to scan the room for threats all the time because you never know what's about to happen. And that hypervigilance is robbed me of so much joy in my life to just relax and have a good time. And it took me realizing, oh, my brothers, the reason they don't get into this trouble is because they're not looking at the wall. I'm focused on the wall. And if you're looking for the wall, you will find it. And you'll find it enough times that eventually you'll start to think that's what life is like. And you can take that and transpose it right onto dating and people's love lives. Because we can get to a point where we feel like the kind of person we've dated is the only kind of person that is out there. That this is what men are like. This is what women are like. You don't need to go online for very long in the men's or women's circles to hear that kind of phrasing. This is what men are like. This is what women are like. And what happens, especially like online, we have so much content out there now that's obsessed with the differences between men and women that it's like, it all is people who are staring at the wall and they can't take their eyes off it. And the more they look for it, the more they see it everywhere they go. And their wall no longer is a wall to them anymore, it's the world. And that's the danger in our love lives. So we have to be able to, and there's a chapter that comes right after the chapter Never Satisfied, that's how to rewire your brain, which is essentially about, once you've come to the awareness of, oh my God, there's a wall I've been staring at, and I no longer want this to be my reality. And I'm seeing, because curiosity is a very powerful word, I'm curious enough to see that other people are having a different reality to me. Then you can start to go, oh, my wall isn't the world, it's a wall. Not everyone keeps crashing into that wall. I'm curious enough and humble enough to see that there are people not crashing into that wall. So I may not know how yet, but how do I get my gaze away from the wall and towards this open space where all sorts of possibilities can happen outside of the ones that I have experienced over and over and over again in my life. And that entire chapter on how to rewire your brain is about how to do that.
If you're working damn hard to kick ass and be unfreaking stoppable, there's one thing I know for a fact, that you need to actually show up confident and ready for anything. And that's sleep. That's why I want to introduce you to the secret to better sleep, Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth's luxury bedding products are crafted with temperature regulating technology, so you're not waking up covered in sweat and then shivering 10 minutes later. And they use super soft and breathable materials that literally feel like a cloud on your skin. I'm officially obsessed. They are literally the softest sheets I've ever felt, and so I definitely would recommend giving Cozy Earth a try. Treat yourself right now to ultimate comfort with Cozy Earth bedding and make your sleep a priority so that you can actually show up every day with confidence and kick ass. Click the link below or head over to cozyearth.com and use the promo code LISA to save an exclusive 35% off right now. Upgrade your nights, transform your days with Cozy Earth. Ooh, dude, I just want to really hammer home a couple of points that you've made that hit me so hard. So the idea that you want peace more than anything in this world, but your past and the way you were brought up and your wiring of your brain has taught you, even though you want this, you actually act in the complete opposite way by being aggressive towards someone that hasn't actually done something, right? But you want the peace, but you become aggressive. And that analogy of it going to relationships where it's like you want a beautiful relationship, like you want someone to love, you want someone to trust, you want someone to be able to turn to at your most vulnerable and to greet you with open arms. That's what you want. But yet you've got your little beady eye, you know, like just waiting for the shoe to drop, waiting for someone to mess up so that you can then pounce on it and say, see, I told you so.
Can I tell you a quick story about that? I had a client who came to me for coaching, and she had a guy that, by all accounts, was treating her well. Like, it had been going well, they had had a great time, great dates. And then a weekend came along, and he had a barbecue with a few of his friends, and he didn't invite her. And it really aggravated a core abandonment wound for her. And she was already guarded in dating. She was already afraid. But so far, this situation had made her feel safe and hopeful again. But then he has a barbecue with a few friends and he doesn't invite her. And all of that core abandonment wound gets activated. He doesn't want me there. He doesn't want me around people that he cares about. He's not proud of me. He's not serious about me. This is all going to end in tears. He doesn't like me as much as I like him. All of it, all of that story coming up. Mm-hmm. Now, none of that is her being present with the reality. One of those things could be true, but all we know is that she didn't get an invite to this barbecue. But that all got activated. So on the day, she was like, I'm going to be indifferent. I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just going to leave it and blah, blah, blah. And then in the middle of the day, she felt like she couldn't help herself. So she texted him and she said, why didn't you invite me to the barbecue? And he said, I'm so sorry. These are friends I haven't seen in a while. I was just trying to get some time with them, but I really do want to see you. And can I call you tonight? Which is all perfectly reasonable. And she was so defensive at this point that she texted him back and said, don't bother. Now, 4 days later, her abandonment wound is fully validated because he now hasn't texted her. Mm-hmm. And she's going, see, I knew I was going to get hurt in this situation. I knew he would lose interest. I knew that, if I opened up to him, blah, blah, blah. So she felt fully validated in this. But if you look at that situation from his side, he had, in his mind, perhaps, we don't know his side, but perhaps done nothing wrong until that point, had a barbecue with his friends, said he wanted to call her that night, and then been told, don't bother. So he then maybe said to himself, one of many things. Maybe he said, oh, wow, she doesn't want me to call, I won't call. Maybe he said, this feels like, I don't feel like I want to take this on. Someone who's this mad at me over so little, I don't want to take this on. Or maybe he didn't like how she reacted and he thought, you know what, maybe this person isn't right for me. We don't know any of that, but it's a very good example of her like she says, there's no wall. Okay, I'm going to create the wall. I'm going to precipitate the very thing. What I want most in the world is love and connection and safety and communication and vulnerability and to be myself and to be accepted for myself. And I'm going to precipitate the exact opposite of all of those things in the way that I approach this situation. So that's the danger in our love lives. And it takes curiosity and a little bravery to do something 1 millimeter to the left of what we normally do. And just to see. Let me just see what happens. And the motivation for doing that is that what I've been doing so far isn't working for me. It keeps precipitating the wrong thing. I don't like where it lands me. I don't like the view it gives me of the world. I can see that other people are getting other results than the ones I'm getting. So let me go a millimeter to the left. And by the way, one thing that can help you do that is asking friends who think differently from you how they think about things. It's like asking, if you get jealous a lot, it's like asking a friend who is in an amazing relationship where they don't get jealous of each other all the time. It's like saying to them, just how? How do you not get jealous? Like, what do you do? I don't get it. Like, what, you love each other so much. What stops you from getting jealous of each other? It's quite possible that he goes out and people hit on him, or you go out and people hit on you. And why, when you go to a party together, doesn't that stuff make you jealous? And you ask dumb questions. It's a very powerful thing. Find people who think differently from you and ask them lots and lots and lots of dumb and curious questions.
But you know what we end up doing, actually, is we do the opposite because we want to be validated. So instead of going to the friend who never gets jealous and saying, hey, teach me how not to get jealous because I'd love to be like you or adopt this skill, I kind of think of it as a skill, we go to the person that's always jealous and then we talk about it so that they can validate how we're feeling. It's like, yeah, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he didn't invite you to the barbecue. See, we all knew he was a loser in a way.
You find someone with the same wall that you have.
Yeah, and it becomes a validation piece because in that moment, you actually feel better about yourself. In the moment, you feel better about yourself that your jealousy is justified.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why it takes humility. And the thing that does it is when you see someone getting a result you'd really like to have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's nice.
If you see someone who has a relationship that you really look at and you go, they have the greatest relationship out of anyone I know. I want that for my life. How do they think about this differently than I do? You know, I said to you, I struggled with trust. I remember meeting our mutual friend, dear friend, Lewis Howes. I remember meeting him years and years and years ago and thinking to myself, he approaches social situations differently than I do. Like the way he shows up for people, he gives more than I do. And I'm very guarded and he's very open-armed. But he's getting a result that I would like. So what's going on there? So I would literally be like, I'd ask Lewis dumb questions. I'd be like, so, but wait, aren't you afraid that if you do this thing for a person, then maybe they'll like not do it for you, or they'll take advantage of you, or they'll this, or they'll that? And he'd be like, well, you know, it's always you know, it might happen. I have people do that to me all the time. I like do something for them and then they do something, they you know, when I would like something, they don't help me, and that's okay. It's like, you know, that's just part of it. And he said, if it keeps happening, maybe that person doesn't become like a close friend, or maybe I give more to other people because I realize that these relationships are more reciprocal. But, you know, I don't sweat it too much in the beginning if that happens. And I remember thinking to myself, it's like if you follow someone down their logic and you're prepared to ask them those questions, you'll meet a fork in the road moment where you realize they go right and you go left. And that will tell you everything you need to know about why your life is the way your life is. So I would realize, like, the moment I thought of giving, I would go, oh, I don't know though, because I feel like I could get, you know, give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. So I feel like I can't trust, so I just won't give. I go, oh, there's one fork in the road moment where I go left and he goes right, because he would just give and not worry about it if it didn't come back to him in that moment, wouldn't oversweat that. And then at the next junction, it would be if I did give and someone didn't give back, I'd be like, oh, this is why I shouldn't do these things. Whereas he would go, no, I'm going to keep doing these things. I'm just going to do them with other people because this relationship isn't a reciprocal one. So if you look at that, if you follow that out for years, you have one person who's got beautiful relationships with people that are reciprocal, people who only know how great he is because he gave first, because he wasn't being guarded all the time, and because he wasn't guarded, they felt like they could let their guard down with him, and it builds beautiful relationships and a bigger community. And one person whose community stays like this. So understanding that something isn't working for you, and then looking at someone else who you really admire or who operates in a way that you appreciate, and it's getting them a different result to you, you have to be prepared to then be a toddler who can't walk in an area where they may be an Olympic athlete and be okay with that. And vice versa, there's ways that you're an Olympic athlete that they're a toddler. So it's not that you're a toddler in every area. It's that for you, that one thing might be the hardest thing in the world right now because you never learned, and because you didn't have parents that modeled it for you, or you had traumatic experiences happen to you. And so for something that comes naturally to someone else and feels like as easy as breathing, for you, it's excruciatingly difficult, and that's where self-compassion comes in. It's not, I'm broken because I found this hard and Lewis didn't. It's not that. It's, there is something that's happened in my life, maybe many things, that have made this disproportionately difficult for me. And the accountability is, my past doesn't have to equal my future here, but the compassion is being with yourself and loving and having sincere compassion for the fact that this hasn't been easy for you. If it was easy, you would have done something different 10 years ago. It was like a light switch, you would have just flicked it, but it wasn't that easy.
So many of my audience, in fact, you write this about your book, how you told yourself at one point that maybe my expectations are too high. And let me read you your quote that hit me very hard. My expectations are what was fucking me up right now. Before, I just appreciated it for what it was. But then I went from gratitude to expectation. But you were saying that as a bad thing, right? You had lowered your expectations because you were like, well, maybe I am expecting too much. And that was a big mistake of yours. And then you started to think twice about what you needed from a partner.
Well, I think that's where we can learn things from other people, right? I can learn something from, in that example, Lewis, but I'm never going to be Lewis. And I'm never going to behave the same way as him socially in every way, because we're just vastly different people. And that's a good thing. So my life will change if I take 5% Lewis and bring it into my world. I don't need to become that because I never could. So firstly, there's that. Secondly, experimentation is really important because it just allows you to get different results. And I really believe that just believing something different is practically impossible for most of us. I think it's not about believing something different is possible. It's about just trying a different approach. And when the different approach gets you a slightly different result than the one you're used to, it becomes this very kind of like addictive thing because it implants a new belief. Not that you now know how to get what you want. It just implants a new belief that something other than the result you've been getting is possible. And that is like inception, because once you've internalized that, you realize, oh my God, there are so many different worlds. My reality is not the only reality. It's like it opens up the playing field for what's possible in life. And that becomes a very exhilarating notion. What you're saying about lowering expectations, to me, comes down to, if I'm worried, am I too fussy? You know, when I say I have standards, are they too high? Because that's a very common thing. Are my standards too high? Am I too picky? Is that what's preventing me from finding love? For me, it's all about asking, what are the things that are most important for me to find before anything else even really matters? And the way I conceptualize that is we have to get away from all the expectations we have that are driven by ego, and we have to start connecting to the wants or the desires or the needs of your soul, of your heart. Like, what's going to make you happy? Because what's going to serve your ego and what's going to make you happy are often two very, very different things. So in a relationship, you might take someone home who you think is like impressive to your friends and family and everyone goes swoons over them, but they're a horrible partner. You might have someone who's the greatest partner in the world who isn't the person you first bring home. Everyone's going to go, whoa, lucky you, look at that person. They're just right for you. But they're not they're not sitting at the dinner table owning the room with their incredible stories and the way that they charm everyone. And when you bring someone home and they charm everyone and they seduce the room at the family dinner table, that's very seductive. That's very compelling. It feels good because everyone pats you on the back for that. But when you found the right person for you, people might just sense that you're peaceful, that you're more yourself. And that might get a more subtle reaction from people. It might be a more profound reaction because people might say to you, I really like who you are when you're with this person. But they're not slapping you on the back going, I mean, they're a hottie. They're going, I really like who you are when you're with this person. And maybe you really like who you are when you're with this person. Maybe you feel more of yourself. Maybe you feel at home. Maybe you feel free to truly be who you are. Maybe you feel seen. And maybe you feel like you're growing. Like, these are very powerful things, but they're things that feed your soul. They're not things that feed your ego. And so when we're choosing someone, I always think of the, are my standards too high thing in relation to what our actual needs are. The needs of our heart, the needs of our soul, not the needs of our ego. Because we often get those two things very, very confused. And then we start creating all of these standards around things that don't matter and that are not going to make you, they're not going to be the thing that makes you happy 10 years from now. You know, I wrote a thing in the book about a guy who always dated dancers. Like, his whole life was dating people who were amazing on the dance floor, and he found it super sexy and it was his thing. And his wife, like, when I talked to him about his wife now, this is the mother of his children, he said she's the least coordinated person I've ever met. And I was like, does it bother you? And he said, how much of my life do I spend dancing, Matthew? It's like, how many times a week am I on the dance floor? He said, every day in my relationship, I watch her being an incredible partner to me, an incredible mother to my children, someone who is there for me, someone who sees me, someone who truly understands me on a level I never have before. Like, does it make any real difference to my life that she can't dance? Like, what does that have to do with my marriage? And I think that everyone can find their own examples of those things that at some point they've become kind of wed to in a way that has become unproductive for them and is actually denying them real opportunities with people that could make exceptional life partners. And I don't just mean that in the sense of like they treat you really well. I don't just mean that, because we need more than someone who treats us well. We need someone that we feel this deep sense of connection with and we feel like we're in it with. But you really can't even discover that with a person if you're ruling people out before you've even begun. And that's what happens for a lot of people, is they never even get far enough with a person to see those things, because we're so busy judging everyone at the outset for things that don't ultimately matter.
Yeah. One thing, speaking of that you write in your book that I absolutely love is that you break down not everything has of equal value. And so how do you start to separate the value of what someone brings to the table, and then what does that mean? Because I think, to your point, sometimes we're like, oh my God, they did this, see, they must love me, or they did this, and it must mean a lot. But we put a lot of value in certain things that actually don't bring value, and then the opposite, the things that actually do bring the value, maybe we overlook. There are 4 values that you say. Number 1 is admiration.
One of the things I write a lot about in this book is, and this book is a real evolution of my work, because it's about really helping people to understand what they can do to find love if it feels like it's been really hard so far, or it hasn't quite worked out the way they wanted to. And maybe they're scared and they feel like time is running out, or, you know, all their friends are getting married and they're increasingly feeling like they're just being left behind, and it scares them, especially when you have a life goal of getting married or having children. For a lot of people, it's the scariest thing in the world. I may never find this thing that I think is fundamental to my happiness in this world. So this book gets into the deeper reasons why people struggle to find love. And one of the big reasons why people struggle to find love is that we're constantly chasing the wrong things. And so I put together this 4 levels model to help us understand whether we're chasing the right things or the wrong things. The first level of importance in any dynamic with a person is admiration, which is to say, by the way, this isn't really important. It's a prerequisite for a successful relationship, but it's not important on its own. Because what admiration is just, you can see someone across the hall and think they're gorgeous or charismatic or interesting or intriguing, or there's something about them. And that's, you like have this kind of like distant admiration for them, or I want to get to know that person better. I'd like to ask that person out. On its own, it doesn't mean anything. And by the way, like, so many unrequited love stories are written about people who longed for someone who didn't know they existed, right? That's just admiration. And it's a story, by the way, we've built up in our head about how important someone is. How can they be that important? You can think they're impressive, but how can they be that important? The person who's important is the person who you know is a great partner to you. That's important. That's someone that it's justifiable to be afraid to lose someone who's an amazing partner to you. But someone who's not even your partner, how can that be important? It's just a feeling. So admiration is level 1, not important. Level 2 is mutual attraction. Also not that important.
Really?
It's a prerequisite. You don't want to be in any relationship where there's not mutual attraction. But on its own,
Right.
not important. My inbox is littered with people writing to me about a situation where there has been mutual attraction, but it's not going anywhere. And so this is where you have chemistry or a connection, or you both like each other, or you've, at the very least, you've both shown that you're attracted to each other. And people get very hung up on mutual attraction. Like that was the thing, and why do we get hung up on it? Because A, we're afraid we're never going to find it and that we're not going to find love, or we're not going to find love in time. And B, because we feel like mutual attraction is hard to find, a lot of us. A lot of people rarely like someone, and so when they like someone and that person seems to like them back or show them some interest, it feels like the most important thing in the world. So now when I feel like there's the hope of something, that's a really, in the story of Pandora, when she opens the box and all of these afflictions fly out, disease and fear and hunger and shame and all of these different horrible afflictions fly out. She closes the box because she's horrified. And the only thing that doesn't escape from the box is hope. And there is this interesting idea that hope, that there was almost, I think it was Nietzsche had this idea that the fact that hope didn't get out was actually the one bit of grace, because hope is the worst of all the afflictions. Because the real terrible thing for mankind is the idea of hoping for it and it not getting any better. And so when you take hope and you add it into mutual attraction, it can fuel every kind of hell that you end up in. Because you keep riding on this idea that there's something there, there's something there, there's something there, even though that thing isn't giving you what you really need or want. And there will be so many people watching this right now whose situation this describes. That's the thing that is in many ways the most dangerous phase of importance, because it actually has relatively little importance, but our body, everything about us gives it the maximum possible importance. And I said to someone recently who said, I had a 3-month relationship with someone who then decided that he wanted to go travel at the end of it. And I'm devastated because I just feel like this was my person. And I don't believe your person, by the way, can ever be someone who doesn't choose you. I don't believe your person can ever be someone who is got different, they see their future as flying solo around the world and you see your future in a committed relationship. That cannot be your person by definition, right? So when I say on this book, find your person, I'm not talking about the person who wants completely different things from you. But she in her mind had decided I had such an amazing 3 months with this person. This is my person. And I said, 3 months is nothing. 3 months is, you can perform for 3 months. 3 months, you're not talking about someone's character, you're talking about their impact. Very different thing. Character can only be seen over time. Impact is something you can feel on a first date. And so many people mistake impact for character on date one. Like, you don't understand. I felt amazing. I went home and I just felt so connected to this person. I felt like they understood me. I felt like we come from similar places. I felt like they're with their family, how I am with mine. And it just feels like this whole picture. You haven't seen anything about this person's character. All you've seen is their impact. You don't know anything about this person. I had someone recently talk to me about how, a guy sent her videos in week 1 of they'd just met and he was sending videos of him with his family. And she was like, I really feel like he's with his family how I am with mine. My mind went to, why is he sending you videos of him with his family in week 1? I'm not saying there was anything underhanded about it, although the way it went, it turned out it wasn't great. But I look at that and I go, this is impact. You can't possibly know who this person is with their family from what they've shown you. You don't really know that because you don't know this person. So when my client came to me and said, I've been seeing someone for 3 months and now he's disappeared, but oh my God, he's my person. I'm like, no, he was fireworks. Fireworks is a very different thing. Fireworks is, you know, what do fireworks need to be special?
They need a flame, like a match, lit to it. Mm-hmm. They need to be loud.
Right.
They need to be almost blinding with how bright they are.
Yep. And there's one more ingredient.
Oh God, what am I missing?
They need to finish.
That's true.
Imagine fireworks that just went on for hour after hour after hour after hour. Now, when fireworks go on for 10 minutes, 15 max, we hold each other's hands and we look up dreamy-eyed and they're magical. Mm-hmm. We love them. But I guarantee you, if those fireworks kept going for another 45 minutes, there'd be a point where we'd start looking at our watch, we'd be like, I'm kind of ready now. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like it wouldn't last. Mm-hmm. Fireworks need that, like they need nighttime and they need to end. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes them so special for us, is like, oh my God, oh wow, they're over? Oh, but weren't they amazing? That's what so many of the early relationships are like that we value. Our life isn't fireworks. On New Year's Eve, when we see the fireworks, we watch the fireworks every year at New Year's Eve, right? The London fireworks, unbelievable. They're incredible. They're so special. But those fireworks aren't our life. Our life is at the end of the fireworks, who's our company? Where are we going home to? How much do we like that home? When we wake up tomorrow, how much do I like the job that I'm going to? How much do I like the things that I have to do now in the new year? That's my life. My life isn't the fireworks on New Year's Eve. My fireworks is my life on New Year's Day. And so when I look at that situation with that woman who said, I dated someone for 3 months and it was amazing for those 3 months and I just think he's the one, I'm like, that's like saying the fireworks on New Year's Eve, those were what was supposed to happen all year for me in 2024. No, your life is your life. What if that person was still in your life and they were showing up for you on a Tuesday and you were making plans for your year and you were enjoying your day to day together and it was still there, then he's part of your life. But if they're not part of your life, then by definition, they were fireworks. So that's the mistake we make at the mutual attraction phase. So then you say, okay, fine, not important. What's level 3? Level 3 is commitment. Two people who aren't just mutually attracted, but they actually say yes to each other. Now, that's something that feels to many people like it's becoming increasingly rare these days. People who actually want commitment, people who actually want to be in a relationship. And one of the reasons I believe it feels so rare for so many people is because they're giving so much time to people at level 2 who are not showing any signs of going to level 3. And if you stay with the person at level 2 and you keep doing that dance with them over and over and over again, using up months or years of your life, then you'll take this person who is your wall and you'll start to think it's the world. So you'll say, no one wants to commit anymore. But the reason why that feels like a global belief, even though there are people committing, is because we've spent so much time with people who won't. Mm-hmm. And we've started to believe them that this is what people are like. This is just what life is like. People don't want real relationships. People don't want to commit. So the third level of importance is commitment. But commitment on its own isn't enough either. You have to have the fourth level, which is compatibility. And compatibility is not just how are we saying yes to each other. It's do we have the same ideas about how we would like to live our life, what we would like to build? Do we agree on a sense of morality together? If I lie all the time and you believe in telling the truth, we might have said yes to each other for a relationship, but we're grossly incompatible. You know, if I think it's fine to show up an hour late for everything I do and you like to be on time and I show up an hour late for every date we go on or for every vacation or then there's an incompatibility there. So you have to have a sense of compatibility. By the way, one of the values that helps you overcome incompatibility is curiosity, teamwork, empathy, compassion. generosity. Because when you have those values, you see someone who's different from you, but you say, well, how do we solve this difference together? Or we say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice on this one because I know it means a lot to you. So this is important to you. I'm going to make it important to me because I'm generous with my energy and because I want to make space for what's important to you. When you have a team player, you can overcome lots of areas of incompatibility, not perhaps on the deepest level. Like if you're fundamentally morally incompatible, that's a real problem. But if in lots of different surface ways or just behavioral ways, there's little incompatibilities, teamwork can overcome a lot of that. Which is why I say to people, if you're in a relationship with someone where you're saying, I need things to be different for this to work, you better check whether teamwork is important to your partner, because if you're trying to overcome those incompatibilities and they're not, then there's just no way. It's hard enough when both of you are trying to solve the problem, but when there's one person trying to solve the problem and the other person isn't, that's a real problem. So that's the way that I structure it in the book, is admiration, mutual attraction, commitment, and compatibility. And when you have those 4 levels, then you have something really worth crying about if it ends. If that person, God forbid, gets taken from you, then it's like there's a deep sense of tragedy about that. Not one that you cannot overcome, but a tragedy nonetheless. What I try to caution people against is creating too many tragedies at level 2, mutual attraction.
And you see that one a lot?
All the time. It feels to people like it's a tragedy that they lost someone who, while they're saying it's such a great tragedy that the love of my life is not with me, that person's buying a phone case on Amazon. They're still here. They're not gone. And they're no longer of this world.
Right.
They're 2 streets over, deciding they don't want to be in the relationship. It's still something to grieve. My friend David Kessler said grief is a foremost expert on grief in the world. He said grief is a change you didn't want. It's an interesting way of looking at grief. Grief is a change you didn't want. And when David Kessler said that to me, I thought of, all of the relationships or situationships that end where people do feel a real sense of grief. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in being heartbroken over someone that you only knew for a month because you had really felt like there was something amazing there. But we have to be clear about what we're grieving. I am grieving, yes, but I'm not grieving the tragedy of losing my person. I'm grieving the loss of the thing that I thought it was, but it wasn't. And that's a big, big difference. I even think that in relationships that have been long-term, where someone breaks up with us and we're deeply, deeply heartbroken, and of course we are, but it's worth sometimes acknowledging, as painful as it is, that that person was, if they broke up with us today, then probably for some time, they've been living in a different space than the one we've been in. Because
isn't that even hard to digest?
Yes, initially, yes, it is. But it also starts to, take away some of the potency of the story you've created. Because it's initially much more wounding to be like, oh my God, on top of this person breaking up with me, I'm now suffering the kind of internal embarrassment of when we were at those dinners or when we were together, they were doubting this thing and questioning whether they wanted to be in it.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, we were just talking about our summer vacation. And so in their heads, were they already breaking up with me? And here I am sitting here planning about the vacation. And they're just thinking, well, we're not going to make it that long anyway. Like that replaying.
And by the way, that becomes a real head trip is, oh my God, we were in the same room on different planets. that's a mind-blowing thing to get your head around. You're like, you were not having the same experience as I was. Like, I thought we were occupying the same realm and we were in it together. And we couldn't have been further apart. You were doubting this and you were questioning whether you wanted to be in it. And, you know, I've, in many cases in a breakup, we found out that they wanted to break up with us today. They've known about it for months. Mm-hmm. In some cases, years. And it explains also, by the way, why someone can move on at what feels to us like lightning speed. And we go, how did they move on weeks after we broke up? How are they with someone else already? I can't even think of being with someone else without throwing up. How? And it's because they've had plenty of time to process this breakup. Mm. We just found out about it. So our processing begins the day we found out. And when you realize that, one thing it does do is instead of romanticizing that person, it allows you to realize that, oh my God, I've been in this space telling myself they're the right person. But the right person for me would not have been spending the last 6 months figuring out whether they wanted to be in this relationship and ultimately coming to the conclusion that they didn't want to be. So I have to start shedding the story that this was my person.
When you do that and you replay and you look back and you really try to assess what, you know, maybe like what went wrong or where are the things that I didn't notice, because I'm always, you know me, I'm all about like self-assessment. Yeah. In that process, how do you make sure that you don't start misinterpreting things as red flags? And the messaging out there can be very confusing. And so I love that you put in your book about how we can interpret something, label it, but now we're contradicting ourselves and actually it's holding ourselves back from finding that real person that deserves to be with us. So you said he doesn't compliment you, red flag, they're with a withholder. He compliments you too much, red flag, they're a love bomber. He never asks questions about you, red flag, they're a narcissist. He asks too many questions about you, red flag, too controlling. He's disrespectful to his mother, red flag, not fully grown. He's too close to his mother, red flag, ditto. So,
yeah.
When you think about, as we're talking, right, where you do maybe the deep work, you look back with your 4 levels of importance, and maybe people get stuck at that second one where they think that mutual attraction is everything. And you start to look back and you go, okay, where did I miss things? How do we make sure that we're not labeling something a red flag? And actually, what are you list in your book, these are actually the red flags we should be paying attention to, that we're not necessarily, and that can, if we don't pay attention to these, we can actually start to act actually detrimental to our relationship because we've picked up the wrong messaging from our assessment of our red flags. Mm.
Well, I think we have to be very careful going into a relationship, like on the lookout for all of the red flags, because it's not, we wouldn't want to go on a date with someone who's like constantly just assessing us for red flags. We want to go on a date with a person who's being present with another person. And, you know, really, we're just trying to assess every step of the way. Is this person someone that I want to keep giving my time and my energy to? Not just physically, but emotionally. Do I want to allow this person to take up psychological space in my life? And therefore, at different stages, if there's something we see that we don't like or appreciate, or it's something that connects to something we may have seen in the past that maybe we ignored before, and ignoring it became one of the great kind of origins of the suffering that we experienced in a previous relationship, then it's worth saying, what's a different approach to this than I've had in the past? And what approach serves me? Now, seeing something I don't like, depending on how egregious it is, but there are lots of things we see that we don't necessarily love that aren't like heinous. They're not something that is like an automatic, oh, that person was genuinely, deeply misogynistic or disrespectful in the thing that they just said. And you know what? This is a first date. It's not my job to give a second date chance to someone who on the first date just clearly is like the complete wrong kind of person for me. But if you see things that feel like they're kind of in that gray area for you, it may not be the best approach for you to just cut and run every time. It might be a better approach to say, well, could I get curious about this and could I actually learn a little more? What would happen if I communicated here? What would happen if I actually expressed how I felt about something that just happened? And then I always think of, before it's a true red flag, unless it's one of the worst ones, it's kind of an amber light. It's like let me see, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought. I've mistaken amber lights for red flags before, where I was way too judgmental about things. And I never spoke to someone about it. I didn't give them a chance. And so I never really got to see that they may not have been as bad as I thought. Or maybe that person, once they realized, they shifted. Look, I remember early on in mine and Audrey's relationship, seeing something that I thought was a little bit of a red flag that like made me jealous, but it was absolutely not a red flag. It was just my stuff. It was like my fear coming out, my trauma. And I remember at the time, instead of approaching it in a very productive way, I approached it from a very defensive way. And it created a fight. It was a moment of real vulnerability for me because I was like, I felt out of control for a moment. Like, that's what it really was about. It's like, for a moment, I felt out of control and I felt like I could get hurt. And when I expressed it, I did not express it. I didn't say, maybe this is an amber light. Let me communicate about this and how I feel, and let me communicate my vulnerability here. I didn't do that. I think I probably made some passive-aggressive remark, went cold. Then when she coaxed it out of me, I then came out in a overly like antagonistic way. And at the end of the conversation, she was left going like, this is not cool. Like the way this went down isn't cool. And then of course, when you feel like you've done that, you feel shameful, right? Because you're like, I've let myself down. I didn't approach that well, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't the best version of myself. It became this beautiful example of how something was never a red flag to begin with. It was just my fear coming out. And it had the potential to push someone away completely. Because when we get scared, a lot of us act out. Just like the woman who said, don't bother calling me. And I was like that. I was that person who was very like, you know, if I got anxious, then I'd get defensive. And if I got defensive, push you away. Because God forbid I let you too close. Because if you see the weakness that's behind this, if you see the fear that's behind this, you're going to find me unattractive. And that was like my deepest fear, is that I've got this very like, I'm impressive and I'm strong and I'm this and I'm that and I'm cool and I'm this. And then if you really see what's going on behind here, some of the time, not 100% of the time, but if you see how fragile I can be, or how weak I can be, or God forbid this moment of insecurity where I feel jealous, then you are going to think I am hideous and pathetic and weak and not attractive, and you won't want me anymore. You'll never look at me the same way again. Right?
Just give me the chills.
That's the fear. And so I didn't want to say any of that. And I think like that's a hard thing for everyone. But you know, when you talk about where does toxic masculinity come from? Where does so much of that male aggression come from? So much of it is just like, I'm not going to give you that information on me, on how scared I really am, or how inferior I can really feel at times, or how insecure I really feel, or how much I fear I don't match up. I'm just going to act out because that's easier. Because I might push you away. I might drive you away. You may think I'm a terrible person, but better that than you see how fragile I am. You know, so, and I had a moment where I just acted out, created an argument. Now, as the argument subsided, and because Audrey is not a storm out kind of a person, I think there was probably, I imagine, because I can't remember exactly, but I imagine there was a moment where she would have said something like, look, I'm really sorry that like this has brought something up for you. Because it's a horrible feeling when something makes you feel jealous and it makes you feel in some way insecure. And, I want to reassure you that blah, blah, blah. And it's in those moments, it's a very powerful thing because someone gets to model something that maybe you haven't seen before. Because maybe in the past, someone would have just, and by the way, they would have been within their rights to, but someone would have just said, screw this. Because by the way, I'd been in a situation before where I said something very vulnerable and someone literally said to me, I find that really unattractive. And it shut me down because I went, my mind at the time, this was many years ago, but in my mind at the time, I went, I'm never doing that again.
Well, yeah, no wonder. I mean, imagine people say that. That can, for someone that's not self-aware like you end up taking it with you.
You take it with you, and many people have. Many people have shared something with someone who wasn't capable or mature enough or compassionate enough to hold space for that. And it went badly, and they resolved never to be that vulnerable with someone again. And we don't take the lesson that was just someone who wasn't on your level of vulnerability or wasn't on your level of like, you were ready to go into a relationship as a whole person and this person didn't want a whole person.
Yeah, we take the wrong takeaway from it. Saying,
and I did for a minute. Trust me, like I think Brené Brown's work is life-changing. I think the stuff she has done in her life is like an extraordinary contribution to the field. But I'll tell you, in that moment, I was like, fuck Brené Brown.
And the horse she rode in.
Because I was like, this doesn't, I had the experience that so many men have, which is, this doesn't work for men. Now, I don't believe that. You'll hear everything else I'm talking about today is the polar opposite of that. But in your mind, when you get hurt, and especially for many guys when they get hurt, or when they get overlooked for somebody else, or when they're vulnerable and it makes them, they feel like, oh, she just went for the stronger guy once she learned that I had this vulnerability. That makes you shut down. It makes you say, the vulnerability stuff isn't for me. And that did shut me down for a minute. It validated something I was already afraid of, which is the worst thing. When it's like, it doesn't even create a new fear, it just confirms an old one. That if anyone knew my darker side, my weaker side, my more shameful side, all the parts of me I'm not proud of, they would never be with me. And with Audrey, she didn't do that. She literally said to me, just so you know, when you tell me something like that, it does not in any way make me think less of you. It doesn't make me love you less. It makes me love you more. It makes me think you're even more special. It makes me think you're even more interesting, more rounded. It doesn't take away all the moments where you're strong and when you're a leader and when you're powerful and when, I see you in your element and you're just all of this, everything about you that's so sexy. It doesn't change any of that. It doesn't become the truth of how I see you. It just allows me to see all of you. And that's what we all want, is someone who sees us holistically, right? That's the greatest gift you can ever give anyone, is to see them, not just their light, but their darkness contextually, in the context of where they've come from, who they are, providing that person has the self-awareness to improve those things or to not use that as a justification for abuse in a relationship, which you can still view someone contextually and holistically and say, wow, their past has led them to be this way. But at that point, you have to say, but I can't have you in my life. But the gift of seeing someone holistically like that is just the greatest gift I think anyone can give another person. And my point is, it might feel like we're a long way from red flags right now, but my point is that when we see something that, again, with the proviso that it's not abusive, genuinely abusive, or something that you just shouldn't even indulge, which doesn't mean you have to have contempt or judge it or say that person is evil at their core. No, it's just, I can't indulge this, I can't have this in my life, and I can't take the risk that you're going to improve this. Everything else, like the woman who said, don't bother, when he said, can I call you later? And she said, don't bother. He could have seen that as a red flag, right? He could have said, red flag, this person's going to be a very difficult presence in my life, very challenging, I don't need that. Or let's say he's the kind of guy that maybe he was like that before. He was a lot less open or very scared. And he had trauma in his life that had led him to be very avoidant in that way. Or maybe he had a parent like that, so he understands that kind of a person. Or he had someone in his life. Maybe he's the perfect person in the world to have compassion for that in her. And so he comes to her and he says, listen, I feel like today you got really scared. And it hurt that I didn't invite you. And I'm so sorry that it hurt you that I didn't invite you. That was not my intention. And, you know, this was the context in which that happened. But I also hate that you had a shitty day today. I hate that you were like feeling anxious today. And you must have been feeling really anxious to send me that message because you and I have been having such a great time. And then you told me, don't bother calling you. You know, that must have come from a real place of pain for you. And if he said that, maybe she feels like, oh my God, no one's approached this with me in this way before. No one's given me that kind of understanding. I feel seen. And maybe she says, yeah, I did get, it made me feel bad. And he says, I get it. He said, listen, the next time you feel bad like that, I need you to explain it to me and to not just shut me out. Because when you shut me out like that, it makes me feel unsafe. And that hurts me. And I know you don't want to hurt me either. So we have to I want us to approach that differently if it happens again. Now that's him taking what could be a red flag, bringing a different level to it, and it might make him the best possible person to help her heal because it becomes a corrective relationship for her. And that's an invitation for her to raise her game and to say, oh, I better bring a different energy to this because I've got someone very special here and they don't deserve me shutting them out in that way without having that conversation. So she gets an invitation to be better. She may not take it.
If you wake up every morning craving that first cup of coffee, but also actually dreading the bloating, the jitters, and the crashes that come with it, you're so not alone, especially for us women. But let's face it, what's the alternative? Zombieing through our morning half awake? Now, there's finally a coffee replacement actually designed for women from Peak called Nandaka. Every cup of Nandaka nourishes you and uplifts your energy instead of making you feel anxious and jittery. Nandaka is expertly formulated with the highest quality and purest ingredients to activate your metabolism, provide sustained energy, and balance your hormones. Kick your coffee habit and enjoy the endless wellness benefits from Nandaka from Peak. Now, for a limited time, you get 15% off plus a free starter kit and a bottle of Propolis throat spray when you shop the link you see on the screen, or you can find it in the show notes. That's 15% off plus a free starter kit. Transform your mornings with Peak. That's what I was going to say. The idea that he gave her the invitation is very powerful because he's not just accepting it, which I think is where a lot of people stop. It's like, oh, they're wounded. Cool, let me just accept it. I'm here for you, don't worry. And she pushes back. Now they may learn the wrong lesson and be like, oh, I can just always say, well, don't bother then. And that's my controlling factor.
Yes.
Versus how you just described it, where he said, it's not, next time, let's do something actually different and better. Yeah. So you're not just accepting, because I think that that's where some people lie, is that they accept it, they hear a behavior, they have compassion. Like this, Dr. Ramani, you know that part of what the narcissist looks for is someone with tremendous empathy that just allows them to behave in that way, because then they feel empathy. Well, I feel bad, they've had a bad day. Well, right, and you start making excuses. And that's where you don't want to be. So I love that you added that last portion on, that he said, next time, this is how we should address it.
Well, empathy, having empathy without having a standard for what you expect in return is a recipe for disaster. That's what in narcissistic relationships, your empathy gets weaponized.
Yes.
And when an endless capacity for empathy meets an endless capacity to take, you have a situation where someone can destroy your life.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I forget, wish I could remember her name. She wrote the book on the opioid crisis, Beth Macy, I think. But she said, when it comes to opioids, we think that there's like there's this mistaken belief that there's like a rock bottom, that when you hit that rock bottom, you'll bounce back up again. But with opioid addiction, there is no such rock bottom. Rock bottom has a trapdoor, and that trapdoor has a basement, and you could just keep falling and falling and falling. And that's true also in narcissistic relationships. When you are endlessly empathetic in that way and you don't have a standard for how things need to get better or progress, or how someone needs to take accountability for their healing, now you have a relationship that can consume you, where you will lose yourself and where in every possible way your life can be destroyed. So you're right, he's not in that situation just having endless empathy and compassion. He's combining empathy and compassion with a mandate for her to bring something different next time. Now he can then, that's now converted a red flag into an amber light. If it doesn't get better, then okay, red flag, because for me, I can't keep going with someone who's not progressing in this way because I deserve more than this, right? I can still have compassion for this person, but I have compassion for myself, and compassion for myself means I know I don't deserve this with my most intimate relationship. So that's what that looks like. And if she gets better in that way and she brings something different, it doesn't mean she'll never have that trigger again. But if she improves and she's starting to like heal, and he'll have ways he needs to heal too, and she might be the right partner to help him heal in some ways, now you have a relationship which is a true, like that's the best. That's the best. It's a relationship that's healing. It's why this idea that you have to be like fully healed before you find a relationship is complete nonsense. The right relationship, it helps you heal. Of course you come with stuff. You've been with Tom a long time. You both still have stuff,
Yes,
right? It's not like you don't come to that fully healed. You come to it with a person who's able to make space for you.
And that as you live on, wounds continuously open up. It's not like you've healed and you never get hurt again. So you get wounds from other places in your life.
That's right.
Not necessarily just from your relationship. And so actually here, and I love what you're saying, that your partner's there to help that process. They're not responsible for it, but they're there to assist.
And with the right level of compassion and kindness, they might be able to provide that invitation for you to expand yourself and to finally move past some of those things. And that's why the conversation on red flags is one we have to be really careful about, because it's easy to keep like throwing out red flags. And that's why I had some fun at the beginning of the red flags chapter with like, if you dish out every red flag possible, you wouldn't date anybody. And by the way, you would be undateable. So at a certain point, you have to say, I need a more mature way of going into this by the way that I relate to someone. It's why I say this book really at its core, it's not just about finding love. It's about building your confidence, but it's also about relational intelligence. When you bring relational intelligence to a situation, you're not, this is like, in a way, like love life, I don't know, mastery is not the right word for it, but you'll get what I mean, is not just I'm on the hunt for someone amazing, it's I'm someone who helps people become amazing. When people are around me, they become better versions of themselves. Now, some people will rise to that in profound ways and other people won't be able to. And that's okay. Those aren't going to be the people I continue to give my time and energy to. But man, when I think of what I love about like mine and Audrey's marriage now, which is crazy, I started writing this book single.
I know, I heard you even say that you're like my fiance as I'm writing in this, and as you go further, it's like my wife.
And I hadn't even, when I started writing this book, I was writing as a single person. So I didn't even know Audrey when I started writing this book, and I finished editing it on my honeymoon. And that is not coincidence. That is a result of, like, the things I talk about in this book is not just work I'm doing with other people, it's the deeper work I've done on myself. And it's what's enabled me to have the relationship I do now. But you know, the thing I love most about mine and Audrey's relationship is that we have helped each other become such better versions of ourselves. And when we start looking at life like that, in a way that's like ultimate ownership, is I'm gonna not just bring out the best in myself, I'm gonna be the kind of force through my compassion and my standards that brings out the best in other people. And then the pool actually starts to get larger. We're constantly hearing this rhetoric of the pool getting smaller, but when you do that, the pool actually gets larger. And I should say that I think when we do this kind of work on ourselves, we start to become more compassionate towards other people. You ever heard it? You know, people in like self-development circles, they say a lot like, oh, you know, now that I'm doing all this self-growth work, it just feels like there's so few people out there for me because I'm doing all this work on myself. And the subtext to it is, I'm so awesome now, everyone else sucks. And I think in many ways, I understand what they're saying, but I think in some ways the opposite is true. That the greatest work I've done in my life is not the work I've done to optimize my life and become so awesome. The greatest work I've done in my life is the work I've done to accept the parts of myself that I thought no one would accept, and to make space for them, and to view myself holistically, and to not carry all this shame and guilt and feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm not lovable. Like, making space for myself as everything that I am has become the most important work that I have done for myself. And when we do that work for ourselves, it can't help but make us make more space for other people. Because when you start to view yourself more compassionately, you also start to view others more compassionately. You naturally stop judging others so much, because when you've connected with the moment where you may have looked crazy, but behind it was a scared part of you that needed love, or when someone else does something that the cheap thing to do would be to call it crazy, you're able to see the scared person behind it that just really needs love. And I think that opens up the world in terms of who you can love and who you can bring out the best in.
And it's no coincidence, like you said, that you ended up going from single to married while doing this process. And the example you just gave of that one moment where she absolutely, if Audrey had been with somebody who was constantly jealous, that was controlling, over manipulative, she may have seen that act that you did, of that potential sign of jealousy, and she may have gone, red flag, nope, not dealing with this, run in the other direction. But it isn't a coincidence that you felt comfortable enough to vocalize it and then have someone to receive it, and that person that received it end up being your wife.
That's exactly right, Lisa. That's exactly right. And she will tell you, if she was sitting here right now, she would probably tell you, I cannot remember the last time he was jealous. I'm not just talking about post us getting married, like over years, she would say, he's not a jealous person. Because there was some part of me that was aggravated. There was some fear or some part of me that was scared that needed healing. And it's a testament to the healing that I've done. That's the part I can take credit for. But it's also a testament to the invitation that she gave me, which is credit to her, and the safety she has created for me, where she's made me feel incredibly safe in this relationship. It's important to say, had I not improved or healed that part of me, she wouldn't have stuck around, right? So I also knew that. So that's where the standards combine with the compassion. It's a very, very potent combination.
Where can people find you and just your amazing book, Love Life, that is literally going to change people's love lives?
If people go to lovelifebook.com, they can not only order a copy of the book and you can do it from wherever you want, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere. You can also use your confirmation code from your receipt to get a ticket to a live event I'm doing on May 4th called Find Your Person, which is really for everyone out there who's like, I'm ready now. Like, I want to take a new approach to this. I want to take seriously the healing that I want to do for myself. I want to take seriously the standards that I want to bring to somebody else. And I want to do it, I want to find love in a way that's authentic to me. So it's going to be an amazing live event. My wife, Audrey, is going to be there with me. We're going to be coaching and teaching together, which is going to be amazing. And that's going to be on May 4th. And there's no way to buy a ticket to that event. It's literally just your book is your ticket. So when you order a copy of the book, you'll get a ticket to the May 4th Find Your Person event. And all of that is at lovelifebook.com.
Ladies, if you want to learn how to stop chasing him and stop settling for the wrong relationship, then keep watching.
I think we've all seen it on social media. It's very common dating advice. You know, whoever cares less holds the power. Whoever cares less wins. Whoever cares less doesn't get hurt. So on and so forth. Care less and you have power is kind of the thesis statement. And I think in theory, I kind of agree with that. I think it's kind of true. Yeah, if you don't care, you're not going to be hurt, of course, practically. If you care second, yeah, then you're not going to be rejected because you're waiting for them to care. So I think these are all practically true things. Again, to the idea of facts and feelings, though, where is that coming from? Well, you know, someone who gives that advice has likely been hurt in the past. Again, no problem. You're not a bad person for being hurt. But I think sometimes we confuse these feelings. So I think when we're thinking about like, wow, I want to preserve myself, I want to protect myself, self-preservation, it's true. But I think a lot of the times is what we fear most is being hurt again, which is true. And that's a very debilitating thing. But I think about like, what does it look like in life to give away your power? And I think it's that to a T. Being the person who only reacts in reaction to other people's behavior. You're essentially waiting for permission to love, to care, to go for something, to do this, that, and the other. I think it's such a passive way to live life. And again, that's easy advice to give because it's like, yeah, no, just go for it. If you're rejected, you're rejected. And I know life is not that simple. I could sit here all day and say rejection is whatever, you're fine. And it's not that easy for everyone. So I think a lot of the time about advice like that, you know, care less and you're protected. And I disagree with it on an emotional level because I think that means you've squarely put yourself in the passenger seat of life. So I think about like, how can we break through that and encourage people to say, I'm willing to care first because one, I believe in what I deserve and I believe in what I want. You know, I want a partner really bad. I want to share my life with someone. Great. So you're willing to go through the things that might detract from your ability to do that in the immediate. How can you put yourself in a position to be willing to be hurt? I think in order to love, you have to be willing to lose love. Matter of fact, that you have to be willing to be hurt. How do you put yourself in a practical headspace to be incentivized, not to be hurt, because that sounds weird, but to hear no, to go first and have that person say, right person, wrong time, not looking for a relationship, whatever it is. How can we practically put ourselves in that headspace? The advice I always give that has worked well for me is, again, it's focus on what the outcome is that you want. And when it comes to like going first or speaking your intention and potentially having it thrown back in your face, I always come back to the idea of when you speak up, when you speak to your intention, when you're willing to go first, you either get what you want or you get what you need. And both of those things are a win. The third, which would be to do nothing, is the only loss in that scenario. So you speak up and you say, I'm interested in you, whatever. You get what you want. They're interested in you back. Great, fantastic. You got what you want. They respond and say, I'm not interested. Well, you got what you needed. It's the result, of course, that hurts the most. And it's the result that could double down on you and make you even go even further into protection mode. But I think about the third scenario, which is what I refer to in the book as living in the gray of life, which is you're not making any decision at all. You're literally floating. You're waiting for other people to come to you and define you for you, your mission, what you want, so on and so forth. I think if those are the three scenarios, I am personally incentivized to put myself in that position. And maybe that's just me. I have a background in sales where like I always used to hear no and I just got over it. And, you know, emotionally, I've always, you know, been willing to hear no, because the second I hear no, I'm like, great, fantastic. Now I don't have to waste time here anymore, practically. So I just try to encourage people, mantra-wise, maybe it's get what I want, get what I need, get what I want, get what I need. Those are the two scenarios, and both are redeeming in some way, as opposed to staying in a headspace of, I don't know, hopefully they'll show me, you know, maybe if they're interested, maybe they'll set the tone. for me, I think I'm very motivated by regret in life and not wanting to look back on regret. That's a big topic. And I think that's unfortunately a fast track to regret, of hoping someone else will give you clarity when we're all so fully capable of giving ourselves clarity.
Oh God, that was so good. But the regret thing is really real, and I'm gonna speak for a lot of women that are probably listening right now. If you get rejected, it now becomes about your worth. And I don't think men have necessarily been taught that, which is why I think it's somewhat easier. Again, I'm always trying not to be just generalized, but it feels like it's somewhat easier for a guy because they've been taught, hey, no, it just means you keep going. As a woman, it becomes about your worth, who you see yourself to be, and then the language you end up using. But now to the point of regret. There's two parts to it. If I keep going, it's like, I'm just going to keep putting myself out there. And now every moment of that is a chip away at my self-esteem. Now it becomes a regret to keep putting yourself out there. I wish I hadn't done it because now I don't feel good about myself. Versus the regret that you're talking about, which is I'd rather hear a no because I don't want to regret wondering.
Two very different different sides of the same coin. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, what's the cliche? Better a whoops than a what if or whatever.
I like that.
That's always been my cup of tea, because regret is such a it makes me so uncomfortable even think about regret, because regret is actions or inaction that you can't change in the past. You cannot go back and change the past. And to me, that makes my skin crawl, because there I was in the past, fully capable of doing something that would embarrass me, make me feel bad, make me feel less, so on and so forth. But comparison of outcomes, I would rather feel that feeling than look back powerless. That's just me. And I know not everyone is capable of that. And to your point about men and women, I too try to stay away from men are this, women are this. But I think practically speaking, it is very true. Men are taught that, you know, shooting your shot is a logistical process.
Yes.
It's a statistical probability. You just do it until you hit gold, and then you could be emotional about it. And women, on the other hand, there's much more emotional vulnerability associated with it. So I think, you know, I think the same advice is true there, going back to what we're talking about, facts and feelings, and like staying, you know, not allowing those things to erode the facts that you've established, coming back to them until you eventually do find that person who doesn't, you know, erode that for yourself.
One of the biggest fallacies is that relationships shouldn't be work. Say what? We put time, effort, and hard work into growing our careers or our business, but love should just happen? After 20 years of being married, all starts with being willing to ask and answer hard questions. I have a free downloadable PDF for you for a happy, successful, lasting love. Click the link below for free access to the most important questions you must ask your partner PDF.
But yeah, I agree. It is a tough. It is tough being a woman out there when, you know, it's maybe we've been taught to, you know, look at our self-worth through the lens, of course, of validation. I just did an episode the other day on the idea of it came from a TikTok I saw of like women being too male-focused, too male-centered. A lot of women, apparently they were kind of dunking on other women for every conversation's about a guy, every conversation's about this, like male attention, this, that, and the other. And I saw that and I was like, I didn't really know that was a thing or something to make fun of, but I was like, a lot of guys are the same way too. Like you get a group of guys together all talking about as women. I was like, regardless of this, that, and the other, having your sole focus be the validation of that partnership, I think is a miss. So perhaps going back to the beginning of why are we placing so much emphasis on the worth that is provided by a partnership? Why are we doing that when, you know, yes, of course, love is life-changing, and that person, your person, can give you something that no one else can, and it can completely change your life. I still think at the end of the day, there are some things that only you can give yourself, namely what you want in life. You know, you can't borrow someone else's definition of what you want or what you deserve, these things. And again, just in a different way to try to encourage people to find that power in themselves, to not borrow the narratives that have been pushed on them by exes or partners or social media even. Social media saying all men are dishonest, no men are ready to date, or all women are crazy, or all women are this. Like, I think buying into those only furthers what we're talking about here when we're trying to erode our worth. We have a bad experience and then we assume everyone else is the same because we've bought into it. I think it's a very slippery slope, and finding ways to, you know, wipe the slate clean. I did an episode a while back called "Is Love Worth the Risk?" And I basically said it's not worth the risk if each time, each time, because it is a process, each time it doesn't work out for you, if you carry that to the next time and say, this time it happened, therefore next time will be the same, so on and so forth, right? Just defining yourself by your past experience. I was like, why would it be worth it? If you've already defined your next outcome as being the same as your past outcome, practically, I can't argue with you, it wouldn't be worth it. If we knew it was a 0% chance of success, it's like, why would you work towards that? I think love is worth, that sounds like a downer of a statement, but I think logically it's true. I think love is always worth the chance, is worth the risk if we are willing to wipe the slate clean. Finding a way to wipe the slate clean. Finding a way to say, this person hurt me, but not all people are like that. Here's what I deserve. Here's why I deserve it. Again, having that why connection, I think, is really important. So finding a way in our heads to wipe the slate clean of those former experiences. Of course, taking the lesson, taking the standards, doing the mindfulness to look back and logically connect the dots. With the statement is, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only back. Love isn't worth the chance if you connect it looking forward based on your past experience. But if we can look back and wipe the slate clean, carry forward some semblance of a lesson, then yeah, it's always worth it. But again, that's a very hopeful outlook.
But I love it. And actually, so wipe the slate clean, actually, this is really freaking powerful, because when I read in your book, I was like, oh my God, I've never thought of it as being two separate things. Because it's not starting from zero. And I think when people are in relationships, one of the fears, going back to where we very first started, right, is the loneliness part of it, is that people may stay in relationships that don't serve them because they don't want to be lonely. You may get into a relationship that doesn't serve you because you don't want to be lonely. And then when I think about partly the loneliness, that people think of that as, well, I don't want to start from square one, right? Like, I've been in this relationship for 5 years. I've dedicated so much time and effort. I don't want to start from zero. But the wiping the slate clean is actually a different thing. So if you don't mind explaining that, because it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think a lot about the topic of starting over. I think the quote that always inspired me is, you're never starting from zero, you're always starting from experience, or whatever the statement is. And I always used to think about that as kind of like, oh, that's nice and hopeful, self-help advice. But the more I thought about it, the more that I come back to this idea of finding proof in life of what we're bringing with us, and like defining it. So like the kind of the soundbite that I always come back to is like, starting over doesn't mean you're getting further away from what you deserve. It means you're getting closer to it, logically, because you're moving past something that hopefully you've defined as being beneath your standard or making you feel lonely or whatever it may be. And moving that aside means you're getting closer, not further away, which is total polar opposite of how we usually think. And I think a lot about, how can I prove to myself that I'm actually bringing things with me, that I'm not starting from scratch, I'm not starting from zero. Because again, it's easy to buy into that. Yeah, I've put years into this relationship. I've defined myself by this. I've told all my friends about this. All my friends know Mr. and Mrs. or me, and like the pressure that comes from that is enormous. For me, this sounds very juvenile compared to a deep subject like that, but I've always come back to the idea of like points in life. And I know you're big on confidence and radical confidence. Originally I was thinking about confidence. Like, where does confidence come from? Confidence isn't something you can think yourself into. It's not something you could just wake up one day and say, I'm confident. Sure, there's something to be said about a mindset, but it comes from experience. Times where you were awkward, tripped, failed, embarrassed, rejected, so on and so forth. You moved forward with that and you realize it didn't debilitate you, it didn't matter, people didn't care as much as you thought they would. It makes you stronger, it makes you better, so on and so forth. So for me, I've always bought into the idea of embarrassment points, awkward points, weird points, where every time I do something where I'm like, well, that was awkward, I'm like, point, I give myself a point, and then I cash it in for confidence, right? Because confidence comes from embarrassment, right? Very simple way of thinking. But, but then I started thinking about like deeper subjects, like, man, what about the times that I'm disappointed? Ooh, disappointment's another one of those tough subjects, kind of like regret, because it usually comes from something that is done and you can't change it. I'm disappointed in myself. And I was thinking, man, disappointment's one of those subjects where I actually kind of buy into it, because a lot of people don't get disappointed anymore because they've lowered the bar so much, or they've disconnected themselves so much from their true pursuit of connection, where they don't feel that feeling of disappointment so much because they're just so far removed from it. And I was like, so when I feel disappointed, as much as, yeah, I'm frustrated with myself for not doing or whatever, or someone else, I'm like, it's good because I still have that connection to some source of truth. I haven't become numb. I don't have a it is what it is mentality. I'm still holding on to it. So anyway, so now I have disappointment points. So back to the idea of starting over, it's like I try to prove to myself what I'm bringing with me, and using that to say I'm not getting further away from something, I'm getting closer to something. And that is the power of starting over. It's the power of temporary people. I think a lot about temporary people. Temporary people are moving you closer to what you deserve because by definition they were temporary. They serve the purpose, hopefully, that you're able to identify in the somewhat present. I think a lot of times it's mostly looking back, but they are proving something to you. Maybe they're offering you proof of a standard or a boundary. We're moving that along with us forward. So embarrassment points, disappointment points, temporary people points.
I love it so much. And the idea of really like assessing your emotions as you're going through them is really, really powerful. And the thing though that I try not to trap myself in is just feeling them and then believing that they're true. Now, people may be like arguing right now in the comments, like, well, every feeling is a true feeling. That is correct, but it can come from something that is false. So for instance, if you say to me, oh my God, Lisa, I really like your hair. And I'd be like, God damn, did he not like it yesterday? Right? Like, and it's just that one thing was like, the feeling is that you don't like my hair. And it's like, but that actually isn't true based on what you said, right? It's just the way that I feel. So the difference between like, are your feelings real or not is something I really battle with. It's not that they're not real. Are they valid in the truth of the situation? Actually, that's a better way of saying it.
Yes.
So in those situations, I'm always the difference between having needs and being needy. Like this is one that I actually battle with a lot because I don't want to feel needy. I don't think anyone likes the feeling of feeling needy. But I think it's super freaking important that you voice your needs.
Of course, always.
So talk to me about, because you talk about the fact that, you know, if you don't say what you want, how can you actually expect someone to show up?
You know, I can't say whether or not someone is too needy or not. I don't know them. I don't know the context of their relationship. From a mindfulness perspective, though, or just thinking about...
But from yourself, like, how do you process whether, am I needy or do I just have needs?
We think that speaking to our needs is unromantic, or that our person should intuitively know exactly what we need. And if I have to speak to it, that means I'm being too needy. And I've just kind of reevaluated and reframed how I think about romance, and that I think speaking to what you need is the most romantic thing ever. And I think the right person wants to give you that need. And I think your soulmate, your perfect partner, whatever word you want to put on it, they're going to get pretty close because they are that person for you. But no one can fully know what you need and how to love you and what you like to hear until you state it. But I think in that context, we're very quick to have these conversations of maybe I am too needy because we think that we shouldn't have to voice these things. And I think it's great. I mean, I'm sure from your relationship, you'd agree that it's great and it's healthy and you should speak to those things, because you could have an amazing partner who wants to give you everything and love you fully, and they want to do all these things, but they can't read your mind. They can get 90% of the way there. So I just come back to this idea of we talk ourselves out because we're like, well, that's not romantic. He should know, she should know. And then we start to devolve and have these conversations, which I just think is unfair to the reality of a relationship. I'm sure you'd agree. But that's how I think about it.
1000%. And one of the stories that came to mind is me and my husband on our honeymoon. So we go to Rome, we went to Venice and Rome, and we're in Rome, we're there for 4 days. And so the first night, I'm like, babe, where do you want to eat? Now, at the time, my husband wasn't very experimental with his food. So being a white boy from Tacoma, Washington, he was like, he wants chicken nuggets and fries.
Oh, man.
So we're in Rome, and he says he wants to go to the Hard Rock Cafe. I was like, well, bless him, it's his honeymoon too. We'll go to the Hard Rock Cafe. Day 2 comes. I turn around because I feel like I'm a good wife. I'm going to take care of his needs. Babe, where do you want to go? Hard Rock Cafe. So we go to the Hard Rock Cafe again. 3rd night. Babe, where do you want to go? Hard Rock Cafe. We have 1 more night left. And the last night, I was like, like I just scream almost in his face, please, no more Hard Rock Cafe. I can't do another. I just want some pasta. And he turns to me and he's like, why didn't you just say so? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, you just kept asking me what I wanted, and I told you. So it was interesting that he had no problem saying what he needs or wants, but yet here I was, just asking him, but not actually addressing what I needed. And so by the final day, it became almost like an explosion for me. But he just was so calm and was like, you just didn't say it. And I was like, wow. And thankfully it happened at the beginning of our marriage. So I was like, well, that was a very clear-lined lesson to just say what you need and then have the discussion about how you both necessarily get what you want and maybe you compromise or something, but it was just so enlightening.
That's a great story. I would be at the Hard Rock Cafe too. I'm a dino nugs, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes kind of guy for sure. So I respect that. A creature of habit. I love that. But yeah, I mean, you know, again, we don't like to say women are like this and men are like this, but I do think there's some conditioning there that speaks to that, where men are like, yeah, well, because I want that, or I need that, or I deserve that. That's why I spoke to that. Whereas I think there's pressure on women in general in society not to fall into this trope of like the whiny, needy girlfriend or wife or whatever it may be. And while maybe there is room for where that is accurate, I think for the most part it is an illusion brought about by this assumption that speaking to your needs makes you needy, too picky, or whiny. Whereas, you know, to a man, it's like, yeah, you know, you speak to what you want, and you speak to what you deserve. You just do it, because you can't read, your mind can't be read. So I think it is kind of a, you know, a thing to sit there and be like, oh, you know, this person will telepathically know what I want, and eventually we'll get to that state. Whereas the right person wants you to speak to those things, and to them, it's like the sexiest thing in the world. You're giving me the blueprint for how to make you feel good and love you, whether that we could even in intimacy and in emotional needs, everything. It's like the right person is going to want to hear those things, and the right person isn't going to be like, oh, don't do that. So, but unfortunately, I'm sure there are instances where someone did speak to their needs and the person threw them back at them, or these things. That's why, again, why we don't want to be hurt twice. But I think the place of truth that I operate from is that speaking to what you want and deserve is sexy, is wanted by your partner.
And I think, yeah, I'm glad that you said that last thing, because it's I want to feel needed. Like, it makes me feel good.
Oh, even better point, yeah.
So, have you watched the movie Daryl? I think it's called Daryl. It's like really old. So the concept is that these husband and wife, and they end up having they got like a robotic child, and it's like a robot. And so the robot can do everything. It doesn't need its mom. And so by the end, the mom's just so sad, and the robot's like turning to the dad and is like, I don't understand, mom. And he's like, because you don't need her. And so by the end, this robot kid starts pretending it needs help choosing its clothes, it needs help choosing the food. And that was what the woman needed. And it's a great example of humanity, is that it feels good to feel needed. And so if you're in a healthy relationship, that actually could be a great sign, right? Whereas if you say a need and your partner actually shows up with excitement.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think, again, you talk about men and masculinity. Men want to feel like providers and powerful and action-oriented. So the right guy is, of course, going to want to give you these things. He wants to feel like, yeah, he's needed in a sense, but also that he can do these things. He can rise above. He can do it. You know, that reminds me of a topic that I just talked about, which I'm very hot on lately, is like thinking about this idea of being in love, or like, what is love, right? The ultimate subject. And I'm sure there's no wrong answer for it, just as there's no complete right answer. But I think a lot of times we confuse love for solely being a feeling, in that we're in love. I am in love. It's an adjective. I think it's an adjective, some kind of adjective statement. I am in love. I am in the feeling, the emotion of love. Whereas, yeah, I think that's true. But what caused that is choices. Like, love is choices. Love is the choices that one makes, and they're likely choices that are amidst discomfort or aversion to doing them. That is the real, barometer for love. It's the choices that are being made. So I think a lot of times, if you're trying to gauge like the health of a relationship or your partner's enthusiasm for a relationship, like, you have to look solely at the choices that are being made, not just the feelings, because I'm sure there are instances in a very healthy relationship where on a Tuesday you're not feeling completely in love. It's just one of those days you got a lot on your mind. But if we're always looking at, am I in love? Do I feel in love as the barometer? I think we can start really rattling our cage with, well, maybe this relationship isn't right. Maybe I'm not in love. But if we're looking at the choices, you make the tough choices for them. They make the tough choices for you. They do the things because they know you want them, even if they don't want to do them. That, I think, is a great lens to look through. And I think it's a powerful way to look at love, because it's all behavior, of course, and the feeling is the byproduct, the symptom of that. So I come back to that as like looking at the choices that you're making for your partner. I think a lot of men, are quick to talk themselves out of a relationship. It's very easy to be like, oh, well, this threatens my independence, or whatever. Maybe I think in my 20s that was a big reason that I would like talk myself out of commitment. I'd be like, oh, I've got a million things I want to do. I can't be in a relationship and be independent at the same time. time, and those were very at odds with me. So I think coming back to like, what are the choices that you make, even if they're hard? I think that's a great way to gauge your like real truthful inclination towards a relationship, even if they're the tough ones to make. Choices, not just feelings, choices, not just emotions, I think is a really healthy way to look.
How did you make that choice then in your 20s?
Well, again, about the reframing, I kind of redefined what I think the purpose of a relationship is. Talking about words and phrases, I don't like the phrase settle down. And I used to think about that phrase. Everyone used to say, yeah, I'm ready to settle down. I had my fun. I'm ready to settle down. You know, I'm successful enough. I'm ready to settle down. And I think that gave me and gives us such a backwards understanding of what the right relationship gives us. I think the right relationship gives us the opposite of settling down with that person. It gives you more life. It gives you more of everything, because now you have this person together, which you can go out and you have this incredible safety net, and you can go out and do more and see more and, you know, just challenge yourself more. So I think for that one, that was a reshift. And then two, specifically independence. I think the right partner makes you more independent. And I always used to wrestle with that, because I always used to think, well, partnership means you lose your independence. It's just inevitable. And maybe that's the trope that we see in movies and whatnot, or maybe there's bad examples that we look to. But there's even something called the dependency paradox, which is a I don't know, psychological observation in child rearing and adolescence, where the more dependency you have between a child and a caretaker, dependency being good dependency, like loyalty, honesty, openness, like the whole thing, the tighter that bond is, the more independent the child is, because they know that they have a parent who, if they trip and fall, they'll pick them up. If they're willing to take a step out on their own and try and fail and be rejected and so on and so forth, because they know they have that safety net. And I don't know when I read about that, and obviously there's degrees to which that's healthy or not healthy, but I always thought about that within the context of a relationship. The closer you are with a partner means you're encouraged to be more independent. And again, thinking about, like, we used to think that speaking your needs is unromantic. I used to think that if I looked at a relationship and one person was independent in the relationship, I was like, that's not a healthy relationship. Like, something's wrong there. And I just totally reframed it. It's like, no, that outside looking in, that's good. That means they have that compassionate dependency, not codependency, but like emotional, you know, bonding there, that they're willing to encourage each other to be independent. And that really just kind of helped me rethink the purpose of a relationship, not to settle down, not to rob you of your independence. It's literally the opposite. Again, talking about opposites and spectrum, that was really freeing for me.
Oh my God, I love this so much. As you were talking, I was thinking about the word independent. I was like, wow, how have we got ourselves so trapped in this word independent that if you're with someone, it means you can't be? And so the word independent almost now means like walls, barriers, blockages. Yeah. And there's a quote, God, I wish I could remember who said it, but it's something like, the most successful people are the people with the most stable home life.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, that is so true. It's a person that you don't feel like you're on rocky ground at home. So you can go out, you can be independent and try new things and try things in business or try things at, you know, at work. But know that no matter what happens, you've got that stable life at home where your partner's going to be there for you. Yeah. And the independence thing is, I think, the fear of, I can't do what I used to. So my husband, I know who I married. He was ambitious. He is ambitious. So to me, getting married was more just me then helping him on his ambition. Not now saying, well, you were ambitious when you were by yourself, but now that we're in a relationship, this thing that makes you who you are, I now don't want that. And I think a lot of people fear that the thing that makes them them, when they get into a relationship, someone's going to try and rob them of it.
Yeah. And I think it's a normal fear, but I think it's a very misplaced fear. I think a lot about, again, the purpose of a relationship. It's not to settle down. It's not to rob you of your independence. I think about it when in the sense, the cliche of, you know, you should try to find someone who is whole, who is, you know, you're two wholes coming together, not two perfect people, but just two wholes in the sense of that. And the idea is your partner is there to amplify what you've already created, or amplify the path that you're on in a realistic sense, right? Of course, in a respectful, reciprocity-driven way, but it's like their role and your role is to amplify the happiness, the drive, the fulfillment, the curiosity that is true to you. And like, I like that word, amplify. They're not there to complete you. They're not there to offer you new complete purpose and here's your life now. They're there to amplify. And that's why I'm big, again, I encourage people as best they can, to be patient and to focus on themselves and build something that only they can give to themselves in the pursuit of being whole, and then have that person come along and amplify it, and you amplify that. Like, to me, that's a beautiful way to think about a relationship. Maybe a bit idealistic, but I think the idea of amplifying, not robbing, certainly not putting, not detracting, absolutely. But I think independence is like the most practical way to bring it to life. And in my current relationship with my girlfriend, it's the perfect representation of that. Like, I am very driven. I do a lot of, creative things where I'm always just chasing little things, and it's great and it's fine. And she does her own thing as well. And there is never a moment of like, ooh, I wonder if that's a bad thing that, she doesn't want to do this with me, or I'm here right now and she didn't come with me to this. It's like, no, it's like we have each other's back so firmly that we're empowered to do it.
Is there a fine line between about being these two independent people that have these drives, that have these goals and desires and dreams, and then coming together if they don't align?
Absolutely, I'm sure. I mean, I think probably come back to the idea of like love languages and like, what do you need? Like, what makes you feel loved? Like, I think if you're too independent, we lose sight of, the needs within the relationship. If it's quality time or physical touch or whatever the stereotypical things are, I think that becomes a problem. Or again, if you go to a deeper level and you're trying to prove something through your independence outside of the relationship, or like that you're worthy of being loved or things like that. Again, the full cycle there, I think that's probably where we get in trouble. But I think, as with everything, the answer is balance. I think at a certain point in a relationship, even if you are hyper independent and you always go and you want to do things, at a certain point you need to come back to the relationship and make maybe the tough choice for the night to close the laptop and just be together. I think, again, tough. I mean, not even tough, but just compassionate choices. But I'm sure it's a slippery slope, I'm sure, of people who are too defined by their work or their curiosity, where we need to come back and practice patience and some stillness. That's big for me. I think in relationships or outside of relationships, just rushing, always trying to do these things where we look back and we realize we had all these amazing moments together and we didn't appreciate them while we had them. My girlfriend and I are really big right now on being in a moment and saying, this is a core memory. Can you think about the core memory phase, maybe as a TikTok thing or just in general, but it's like, the only way we define core memories is looking back. You're like, man, that was a core memory. Oh, take me back, take me back to our honeymoon. Like, oh, beautiful, that was so great. It's like, that's great. It's great to reminisce. It's great to be nostalgic. But I want to say in the moment that this is a core memory, or this is a core memory together. And we're going to appreciate it as such in the moment. So like, that's big for me. That's just presence and that's just gratitude. But I think that's very, very important. And maybe that's the kind of the pause moment between two hyper independent people that, can help bring you together and actually be present. Because isn't that the point of a relationship, to be present together?
In those moments, like, the core memories can be beautiful, but also they can be really detrimental, right? Like, you have this beautiful relationship and then you have this one moment that can actually crack your relationship forever, that then becomes a core memory that you wish you didn't have.
Yep. Balance. Yeah. That's the toughest part. It's like, what do we do with that memory? I mean, I think the cliche is like, do we use it to empower ourselves or do we use it to hold ourselves back? I mean, I think that's the magic of life. If you can figure that out, where you have bad, frustrating memories and you can take what you need from it, namely a learning, some kind of patience with yourself. If you can do that, I think you've got 99% of life figured out. And that's the toughest thing in the world, is like, what do you do with that memory? What is that proof of? Again, it's like in the court of law. Are you the prosecutor or are you the defendant? Like, what is our ethos on life? Or like, I'd say, like, are we glass half full or half empty? And life isn't that simple, but like, what are the facts that we've established for ourselves that we're looking to support? Not delusionally, because sometimes you deserve to be embarrassed or rejected, or like, life is life, but like, what can we do with that so we don't devolve and go to this headspace of determining future worth based on past experience? That is the key to life. And if we had a blueprint for that, everyone would follow it, but I think it's unique to each and every person.
I love that. You just mentioned patience, though, but in your book, you talk about one of the big things that people say, like one of the bad dating advice or relationship advices is, like, oh no, like, have hope that they're going to change. And like, you're just like, sometimes, like, hope can actually just lead you astray and you end up staying in a relationship because you have the hope. So where's the gap or the line between patience and hope?
I think it's a fine one. I think it's a fine line. I don't know. I mean, I think for me, the question, like, I think there's a big temptation, and it's weird. We're very hypocritical. It's like we're always rushing. Of course, I'm getting older. I got to get in a relationship. I got to be SVP of this guy. I got to do these things. But then when we find ourselves in situations that aren't, reciprocated or not a healthy relationship, all of a sudden we become very patient. Oh, things will change, or, I've got that vision for the white picket fence. Like one day things will be good. So like we're very hit or miss with our emotions. It is kind of funny that we do that. So I think a big problem, of course, is we date in potential and we don't date in reality. We're very quick to give people credit for the things that we see a glimmer of hope for, and then we ignore the things that are like glaring red flags. And again, I think that's a personal balance. We need to figure out what it is that we want and deserve and hold ourselves to it. That's a personal journey. I think for me, the question I always come back to in those contexts is, in this moment, with the way the relationship currently is, not date one, date two, but like we're in the relationship, if nothing were to change from here, is this good enough for me? I don't really like the phrase good enough, but just practically, is this fulfilling enough? Is this compassion enough? Is this whatever enough, this thing that we're after? That's the most, revealing question. And certainly every relationship and every person is evolving and needing work, and we're all finding ways to love ourselves more and love other people and work through insecurities. But looking at like the measure of reciprocity in the relationship, what is given and what is received, what is the enthusiasm either way, if nothing about that were to change, is that good enough for you in the moment? I think a lot of times we don't answer that question, or we're afraid to ask it because sometimes the answer is no, and then we're back to the conversation about starting over, and that's tough. But I think finding a way, again, mindfulness, finding a way to zoom back in on the present, and instead of placing all of our hopes in potential and what could be, thinking about change. I mean, the cliche is true that, people have to want to change. You can't force someone to change. I certainly think you can be a catalyst for someone to change. You can be the reason that they change, in the sense that you have provided them proof of why they should change and they want to change, not to appease you, not to get you off their back, not so you stop whining about it or whatever things they might say, but like from a place of truth and power for them. They want to change because your example in their life has shown them why it's real, why they should, why they've been remiss this whole time. In that instance, I think change is possible, and I think you can play a role, but I'd say 90% of the time, the whole trope of like, he will change for me, or she will change, or whatever variation, I think it's misplaced. You can't force someone to change. And I think, unfortunately, we realize that sometimes late in that process where we're doing this negotiation with each other. The only proof is changed behavior, but it has to come from a place of genuine intention and why. They have to know why they're doing these things so that it's long-standing change. Otherwise, it'll just collapse on itself.
So you can't change someone. But let's say you're in this relationship and you've done all the work, you've really tried to choose the right person, you show up confident, you stand your ground, you have these boundaries, you set yourself up for success, you communicate with your partner, and over time, you start to change, but they don't. So now in this situation, I want to really tie everything that we've just spoken about together. So now in this situation, you can't change them. You've done your own self-work. You've really dug deep into finding your self-worth. But they don't change. In those moments, at what point do you walk away?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I think the answer that I would come back to would be, have you had the conversation about their change? Maybe, for them, they have put, a ceiling on their growth, and they haven't had the curiosity driving them, or for something's holding them back that isn't a reflection of their, health, of their appetite for you, their enthusiasm for you. I think that could always be true. I always try to approach things from a place of empathy. Like, you talk to a lot of women, they're like, the guy, he didn't try to kiss me after a date or something like that, or he didn't text me, and then you dive into it, and well, a couple relationships ago, he did, and was horribly rejected and made fun of, or, he did text and she was like, ew, get away from me, I never want to date you. And he internalized that, right? In the same way that women internalize things. So we're carrying with us these things that have dictated limits to our enthusiasm, to our action, maybe to our growth, things like that. So, I'm not encouraging people to be overly patient and put up with things that are clearly beneath their standard for growth and evolution. But I think, the only way to truly know is to have these conversations to see what is their awareness of yours versus theirs. Maybe this is not even on the plate. But from there, I mean, I think it's up to you. Again, I'm deciding if nothing were to change at this point, is that good enough? Because we're always evolving. You know, and I would challenge people to not always be chasing better and more. I think, you know, I always come back to the idea of we are always, in a sense, chasing better and more in life. And I think that's great. I think we're all capable of better and more in a sense. But I have found in my life that some of my most fulfilling moments and evolutions have come from different and simpler. Not necessarily 10x or bigger or better, but different or simpler varieties.
Chasing simpler or different versus chasing something better.
Correct, or considering something different or simpler. Maybe, you know, maybe the key to, you know, a professional change or a relationship change lies in simpler. Maybe let's take some of the things out that are detracting, rather instead of trying to just build. Maybe that's a thought. So I think just like opening your heart and your mind to like what growth looks like, as opposed to always assuming it's just this like lateral kind of on a straight line thing could be a thought. But then at the end of the day, of course, I think it comes down to that question: if nothing were to change, is this good enough? Is this growth oriented? Is it enough? And so on and so forth.
Oh, that's really strong, because again, I think through the idea that I think everyone wants a long-lasting, happy relationship, right? The happy is very important. And so every time I think through this, I mean, you know, I've told you that I've been married for 20 years. We both evolve and we both change. So even if you do the work, right? Like if you're single and you've done the work of making sure that, you know who you are, you've done like everything that we've just spoken about. Now I just think about, you've done all that, you have this beautiful relationship, but 10, 15, 20 years down the line, you hope to be different people. And so if one of you has either grown and the other one hasn't, or if you've grown in opposite directions, what's that thing? I'm always looking, right? What's that thing that allows people to reconnect? And I've thought through this 1,000 different ways. I don't know where I would be if my husband didn't also have a growth mindset, because I've got such a growth mindset that the advice I always give, and in fact, I get a lot of pushback on this, help me actually, Case. I get a lot of pushback because I'm like, well, do this, say this, do this. And they're like, yeah, but it's worked for you because you have a partner who has a growth mindset, who can receive that type of conversation.
Yeah. I think for me, being younger, 34, in a 2-year relationship, I think for me, like, once you're in a relationship, we can't change the past, of course, but I think it's so important to define what a healthy relationship looks like to you. What is the point of a relationship? Again, finding someone with a growth mindset, I think you're going to find that person if you've aligned from the beginning that a relationship is not about settling down, right? So again, going back to what we're talking about there. So maybe that's your pre-flight checklist before you get in a relationship. So once you're in the relationship, I'm not so sure, but I do think a lot of communication is going to be healthy. But also, again, it's like I genuinely challenge myself, because I definitely have a growth mindset, and I think sometimes I think growth mindset is essential. I think it's imperative. But I think sometimes it can get the better of you. Of like, you're always chasing something, could be bigger, better, but why? Like, why do you want that thing that you're trying to evolve to? And we're not necessarily talking about emotional intelligence growth and, you know, things like that, like the internal stuff, but like accolades and exposure and things like that. Like, why are we trying to evolve to that? So I really do try to challenge myself in those instances. Why? Why am I going after these things? Bigger question, like, why do I even want the things that I want? Maybe these aren't true to me, and I've tricked myself into thinking this is a growth mindset where it's really not. I'm just copying and pasting, and now that's a different conversation, and that's coming back to me. So that's how I would approach it, knowing I don't really have the breadth of a, you know, longer relationship to have a great answer to that, but like challenging yourself on, why do you want these things? Are you trying to prove something? Talked a lot in the book about mimetic desire, about why you want the things you want. Maybe they aren't true to you. Maybe you've spent a lifetime chasing something only to realize it never really meant anything to you. You just did it because you've been conditioned in a sense to want it. So society has taught you that this is what you want, and maybe you've duped yourself into thinking it's a growth mindset. So a bit of a challenge to myself or anyone in that instance to maybe take a step back and really get to the why of it before saying, you know, this is the thing. If it's not being mirrored in a partner, it's a negative. Well, maybe we both have some work to do to decide, how are we defining these things in the first place?
I love that. I'm glad that you brought up mimetic desire, by the way. And you describe it in the book. It's like if you break up with your boyfriend and then you get with someone else, the guy, your ex-boyfriend, now wants you because they see you with someone else.
Right.
So explain that. Explain what's going on. And then this is a very common thing. And I'm, again, just going to put myself as the example. I used to think, oh, well, I knew he loved me, but actually I was blinding myself to the fact that it was just mimetic desire and not actually that he wanted me.
Yeah.
What up, homie? I've got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 steps to becoming confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
We find the wrong proof point there. Well, I mean, mimetic desire or mimetic theory is really interesting. Obviously not my own. Rene Girard is like the grandfather of it. There's a great book called Wanting by Luke Burgess, which like really dives into the whole thing. But the genesis of it was with this Professor Girard, who was this, you know, great academic in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, somewhere in there, basically talking about he was in a relationship with this woman, and then he was young and kind of an F-boy for all measures, and decided he wanted to play the field a bit more, and he broke up with her, and then he saw her out and about with another boyfriend, and she looked so happy, and they were great together, and then all of a sudden he found himself wanting to get back together with her. And his theory from that was the reason that he wanted to get back was he had seen a model of what he should want. That is a happy, healthy relationship. And it was a model to him about why he should want that. And he broke it all down in different ways. And he's basically spent the rest of his days as an academic looking at this idea of basically social copycat in every industry, from the things that we buy to the way that we view life to the relationships to consumerism to advertising, and that there's very little in life that we have decided we want that hasn't been conditioned in a sense, in a you know, kind of keeping up with the Joneses kind of way, and that everything has been modeled to us in a sense. You know, buy this, look this way, get this feeling. This is the relationship you should want, and so on and so forth. And I think it's a really interesting point, of course, because nothing in life is devoid of inspiration in some sense, and I think balance is good. I think it's great to be inspired by other people. Of course, you have to, you know, be inspired in some sense. It's very few people create from absolute zero. We're all inspired in different ways. But I like it as a proof point that anytime I feel compelled to do something that I don't really know why I'm doing it, I come back to this point of pause and say, well, perhaps this is something that has been modeled to me by a parent, by an ex, by a friend, by the media, by social media, whatever it is. Maybe I can take pause and push back on this thing instead of just buying in blindly into a timeline, a belief, a standard, a boundary. Talk about picky when we first opened. A lot of those picky things maybe, you know, didn't mean much to us, but we were borrowing it. The silliest example I always give is that there are some women, genuinely, and I have respect for them, who want their boyfriend to post them as their Woman Crush Wednesday on social media. And if the guy doesn't, they're genuinely upset because they see that as proof that their relationship is healthy. And then there are other women who think it's the most absurd thing in the world. So just the point of like two different things. And I think about, you know, we all could have a broad spectrum of wants and needs. And I like that as an example of some people buy into it, some people don't. And I think that's how we should approach really every desire in life, not to be that annoying, cynical person who's like, why, or like whatever, but just like the challenge of things that we feel compelled to do in order to deliver a certain outcome. I think is so powerful, because I think we'd be remiss to think that we've decided what we want completely in life. I think as we get older, certainly we've let go of a lot of the things that we've been carrying with us. We're like, I can't believe I wanted that for so long, or I can't believe I was validated by this, that, and the other. But I think 20s, 30s, I think we're very quick to be borrowing these things. And that's the essence of life. You borrow, you try it, and you let go. But some things we're holding on to. I think the big things, of course, would be money as validation, partnership status as validation, and you know certain accolades and superficial things like that. But I really am drawn to that idea of why do we want what we want? Have we sat down and decided why we want it? That's my favorite word in the world, is why. If you could truly ask yourself why at multiple levels and get to the bottom of something, I think you have a lot of, very cathartic conversations with yourself where you actually do change. But I think coming back to the idea of, just recognizing that maybe there's some things in your life that you've been blindly chasing that aren't true to you, that could be the thing you need to change.
I love that. And writing down like your whys of why you value things is actually really beautiful. Great way of people like really assessing, because I think our natural instinct is to beat ourselves up, right? Like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe I fell for that. Or it's like, well, instead of beating yourself up, just say, oh, these are what I think I value, and now let me question them and see if they actually align with my true essence. I don't necessarily use that word much, but and as you were talking as well, I do think, to your point, that we look at other people and we go, oh, that must be valuable. And I'm just going to be honest. I'm just going to be transparent. Right? I have done this when I was in my teenage years. I dumped a boy. I was like 16. I know, it's so horrible. I dumped a boy. And 16, it was the language we used. And then he went out with one of the popular girls in school. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Because she was popular. She goes out with him, and so now I started like, what did I miss? Because I thought that the popular girl had better, like a better value system than I did. So I must now like, oh shit, and then I started regretting it, and like I shouldn't have dumped him, and all of this like story. I think building on the idea of mimetic theory and desire, there's a lot to be said about then the role that like conformity and pressure plays on that. I had another chapter in there about this guy named Solomon Asch. He was like the founding father of conformity study, a very niche academic field, but really interesting stuff in like the 50s to prove the influence that social pressure has on people. And he did this really simple experiment. I'll probably butcher it, but basically he put a bunch of people in a room where everyone was in on it except for one person, and they were trying to gauge this one person to see how they reacted to other people's answers. And basically what they did, they had a room with, call it 10 people, 9 of which were these Confederates, and 1 was the true study. And he basically showed them 3 lines, just like little straight lines of different length, and then drew a third one, and he was like, which line is that similar to, most similar to of the other ones? And it was a blatantly obvious answer, right? They were all certain length, and he was, which one is it most similar to? And he had the one person answer last, so that person had to see every single answer that all the Confederates answered, and he had the Confederates give wrong answers until it finally got to that last person, and in like 75% of the case, that person just followed suit, even though it was obviously wrong. They were like, yeah, that book's green. Yep, it's green. And he did this just to prove the power of social conformity. And it was really interesting stuff because, you know, for one, that's the power of numbers, right? You got enough people in a room saying one thing, you're going to follow suit because you don't want to be wrong. And afterwards, he would survey them. Like, why would you say that? And they would either say they didn't want to be wrong, they didn't want to be embarrassed, or to your point, they assumed that the other people knew something they didn't know. Like, well, he's like, and maybe it was green. Maybe I'm colorblind all of a sudden in this instance. Like, and they convinced themselves of that. So like really interesting ways that we can question our decisions based on larger group think, or just, you know, assuming that because someone else, for instance, someone else looks happy, that person looks happy on Instagram, so therefore they have something that I need to mimic their life. Or a lot of people own a certain shoe. Well, that shoe must offer them something that I need. They must be aware of something, or investment strategy, or whatever is hot topic of the day. I think you combine mimetic theory and conformity plus our own robot mode. It's kind of a melting pot of challenges. But really the only way to challenge a challenge is to be aware of it, I suppose. So that's why I included a chapter in there. And for me, it's like I'm always just trying to like, why do I want this thing? Why am I doing this thing? Am I doing it for them? Where did this come from? And then I hit why, and it's helpful. It really hit me, and I love that part of the book because being Greek Orthodox, I think when it comes to expectations with religion or with family, it really does align with everything you just said, right? The conformity, the like everyone pointing at the short line when you're like, I think it's the long one. You know, the 70%, like when you're in a very religious family and everyone around you is going to church and they're praying and everything, and then you're the one that's sitting there maybe saying like, I don't know if I believe in God, right? Like, obviously, that's the religious side of it. But even let's go back to relationships. If you're in, you know, a family that, in fact, my own, everyone marries Greek Orthodox. It's like, that was just the thing. And I brought Tom into the family who's, you know, hadn't been christened. And so everybody was like, he's not your type, and he's not, you guys aren't going to last. And every time I would ask someone in my family why, it's like, because you guys can't relate to each other. So it was everyone else's expectations of what they thought the value system is in a relationship, and the fact that if you come from different places, then surely you can't value each other. And so that became their value system. Yeah, I think we'd be remiss to also not place a lot of emphasis on the role that family, close family, distant family plays in everything we're talking about here. And it's easy to be like, oh, social media and you know,
people from college or whatever, but like family plays a huge role in establishing those things from early on. I mean, it's a reason why, you know, therapists, basically their sole job is to break down conditioning. And conditioning comes early on in childhood and adolescence, and how you're baked in to respond to the world. Like, where does your natural appetite come from? Like, how do you respond to drama? All these different things comes from that. And if you have, you know, parents for generations that have, you know, bought into certain things in a healthy way, perhaps, or not, it's very difficult to break free from that, much less than break free from the conformity that comes from just the greater society. So there's a lot of unlearning to be had, and I think perhaps that's the real value of journaling and therapy. It's not, again, I'm really passionate about this topic. It's not always about more and better. It's about unlearning. It's about unburdening. It's about simpler. It could be about completely different. But I think sometimes we're very bullheaded and we double down on these things, whereas maybe we don't need to. And I think that could be really liberating.
I love the unlearning part. I wish I had the quote at hand, but in your book you say something like, don't let ex-boyfriends like dictate your worth. Don't let family dictate your worth. Don't let business, colleagues, like bosses dictate your worth.
Yeah.
And so like the unwiring or the unlearning, where we get into a relationship, whether it's partner, business, family, and then we have an idea, we work hard at it, but over time, other people start to erode that feeling or that credibility that we've tried to build within ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're very quick to kind of outsource our needs, outsource our feelings to other people. I think the quote that I have, one of the quotes I wrote that was really popular was, life changes for the better when we prioritize how our life feels to us instead of how it looks to other people. And I think if we were to get real honest with ourselves, we do a lot of things, like literal actions, in order to look good to other people, to look good on paper, whether or not people are even looking at us. Like, we've developed this whole ethos where everyone's looking at us and cares about us. And it's just, you know, we do these things out of that. And I think a true compassionate, free, most importantly, free life is one where we're doing things because it feels rewarding to us. And not in like a hedonistic, you know, going all in way, but like reprioritizing, why are we doing the things we're doing? Are we doing them to look good on paper to other people and then hope that a personal feeling of fulfillment comes from that? Or are we doing things because it feels good to us and honors our truth? That's always a word that I've struggled with. What does our truth mean? I mean, that's just literal radical honesty that's backed by why. Are our actions following that? Or are they following some larger, you know, system of attention or influence or impressing other people? I think that's the question we have to answer, and it could take a long time, I suppose, to come up with a system that helps you break free. But I think at least recognizing that there's a difference between actions that look good to other people and that feel good to you. It's great to find the sweet spot where it's one and the same, but that could take a while.
If you want to learn the most important love lesson before it's too late, then click here right now. So right now you are single, and you say you're on the dating streets, if you will. And you said in order to be
hilarious,
a great